Hello everyone, and welcome to Fleet's Random Ramblings 52. Yeah, 52. Can you believe it? Shocking, ain't it? But well, there we are. That's the way it goes. And that's where we are. So, without further ado and without further thing, let me just very quickly get the usual procedure up and running. Still haven't figured out how to schedule these things ahead of time. I'll get. That's the way. I'll get there. I will most definitively get there. But for now, keep doing what we're doing because it's going fairly well. Growth is fairly steady. 1 or 2 subscribers every couple of weeks coming in. So it's nice so far. Let the Patreon boys know what's going on. And there we go. And now that I've done that, put Ramblings off to one side. Open up Discord. Make sure Ramblings slots in there quite nicely. Yes, it does. Get rid of that. Don't need that. And here we go. Hello everyone on Discord, and welcome to Fleet's Random Ramblings once again. As usual, every Monday I'm here to sprout drivel that I claim is in fact facts and knowledge, and get away with it scot-free.
Moshi, it's your resident war crime specialist.
Oh God. Hello, Foxo.
See, at least I introduced myself semi-normally. Or at least just be quiet and appear.
Yes, you can ask.
Alright, let's get the document up.
I think that question is not what I was doing in the Congo in the late 2010s.
There we go again.
A1 versus A3, which looks better? They're the same engine! They look the
A4.
same! A4s are not better.
A4.
Fuck off. Get fucked.
Nope. A4
Which one
superior locomotive.
They don't have enough differences to make it
This has the
really...
vibe of. This has the vibe of. Which coat is better, the blue one or the red one?
Yeah.
They have the exact same fucking coat.
Yeah.
Yes, we get that you don't like trains.
Darth
Some of us
Sidious-
still do.
Darth Sidious... oh, bloody hell, never mind. We're going to have to snuck in here
Yep.
with a question. Okay, hello Stephen Meyer, hello Montana on YouTube. Oh, then Montana's got a YouTube question now. So it is, if you could raise one wreck, which wreck would it be? Well, if I could raise one wreck, I'd like to raise, well, I don't think...
Ooh, that's a tough one, honestly.
No, actually, for me it's not, because I just realised, why would I want to raise a wreck? I can't think of any decent reason why I would want to. They're either all war graves, or we don't know where they are.
There was that plan the Japanese had a few years ago, and is still in consideration of refloating the Yamato bits and bringing it to Japan. I say the bits for a reason.
Yeah, she did suffer a rather catastrophic magazine explosion.
She is in like
died.
3 chunks at the moment.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I know it. Mate, technically, it's a war grave, but I want to bring Britannic back up.
Yeah, Britannic would be a nice one.
Because we fucked up and lost Olympic. Titanic's the Titanic. Honestly, we need the Titanic so we can keep doing our yearly billionaire sacrifice to
Deep ones, yeah.
Actually, a really random one, actually. Possibly Hunter or Hardy.
Poseidon. So Britannic's the option.
Yeah.
Arwen would be cool as well, but
yeah.
she went to banker bag, didn't she?
Yes,
yeah.
Very big
she
explosion.
suffered a boiler explosion that cascaded into a magazine explosion.
Yeah.
Because literally what happened was her funnel hit the water, cold seawater met boiling hot oil fires, boiler explosion, which immediately
Pressure
almost
from the
second-
boiler.
Yeah, cascaded into a magazine explosion.
I believe there was a 4-inch magazine detonation beforehand, but it wasn't. It was not that much. Yeah, either way, she very much exploded. She exploded in every way really she could.
Yeah. Your typical gunnery officer asks, do you think the Clemenceau class carriers are better than the 1960s Essexes, Midways, and Forrestal classes? I look at the comments section on Reddit, someone was so adamant that the Clemenceau class carriers are better than the 1960s Essex class and Midway class. Because they are. Because the Clemenceau class carriers are modern Cold War carriers.
Fleet.
Yes.
You say Forestals at the start of that question.
Yes. You'll
The
notice.
Forestals are included.
You'll notice. I said they're better than the Essexes and the Midways. I hadn't gotten to the Forestals yet.
Yeah, that's right. Let him actually finish, please, Foxo. Right?
Yeah. The Clemenceau class are just flat out better than the Essexes and the Midways.
I would hope they would be.
They are. But the Forestals are super carriers of a similar era, but they're the first super carriers. They are just superior vessels than the Clemenceaus. It's not really much more complicated than that.
Yeah,
The Forestals weren't super carriers. They're
no.
largely American conventional carriers.
No. They're the first super carriers.
Technically speaking, they are classed as super carriers, but they don't fall under what most then class super carriers later in the line do.
Yeah, because the thing is,
they
were
the first generation.
Yeah, they were the first and the smallest, but they are still super carriers because they've gone beyond they have moved as far beyond Midway in terms of tonnage as Midway was beyond the Essexes. That's how much of a tonnage growth they are. They're 20,000 tons heavier than Midway is.
Actually,
because
you say that, Yuki.
But it's more of a case of with the Forestals. I thought it was the angled flight deck ones were classified as super carriers.
No,
The Forrestal and her sister, who were through deck straight deck carriers, were still normal carriers until they were converted.
No,
Most people do still consider them. Also, counterpoint Yuki, saying Dreadnought's it's like saying Dreadnought's terrible compared to every other Dreadnought.
She is.
The South Carolina, she's not. South Carolinas, Nassaus, and Espanias would like a word with you.
Well, the Espanias are. Well, that's a different kettle of fish entirely.
Espanias are Dreadnoughts, and as much as I like them because they're cute little ships, they're still pretty bad. Do we have another case of...
Anyway, so next question.
It's just a case of the Forestals would quite happily dunk on pretty much anything that's not a CVN, even at the end of their service lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought I mentioned Nassau there, Wellesley. I'm sure I mentioned Nassau, but
but Yuki, she's not obsolete because she's still better than 99% of ships on the planet.
Yeah. Anyway,
also Forestals weren't obsolete for a very long time. Anyway, YouTube question, Fleet.
Knight 6831. Why is it forgotten that Bismarck-class battleship's AA battery was designed with the expectation that the Royal Navy would upgrade its torpedo bombers? I mean, I would argue that it wasn't designed with that purpose, because I would argue that it's designed to shoot down aircraft. Not specifically...
Sorry, what was the question?
Knight 6831 asks, why is it forgotten that the Bismarck-class battleship's AA battery was designed with the expectation that the Royal Navy would upgrade its torpedo bombers? I mean...
It wasn't?
I mean, it wasn't specifically, but it was designed to deal with the new generation. Like most battleships of the period, built in the post-treaty period, you see a heavy AA battery and a mix of medium and light anti-aircraft guns, as you see on every other battleship of the period.
I also would
admittedly, Bismarck
Swordfish aren't actually obsolete.
Well, okay. By 1941, they are. They are soldering on because there is no replacement available at that moment.
There is.
But
there's multiple replacements.
Then why aren't they on the fleet carriers? Anyway, moving on.
The Albacore! The motherfucking Albacore!
Which is worse than the aircraft it replaced. But
exactly. You have to remember that.
The Swordfish also was very unique in a number of its ways they could launch torpedo attacks.
Yes, this is true. But the fact still remains, however, that however you want to slice it, the Swordfish was obsolete. all torpedo bombers every nation that operated carrier-based torpedo bombers had obsolete carrier-based torpedo bombers in 1941. Japan had the B-5N, the US had the TBD Devastator, Britain had the Swordfish. All were obsolete.
Not really.
I don't necessarily agree. By 42, yes. But in 41 is the last year I'd say they're not obsolete.
Either way, it does.
Because-
Either
Also,
way,
yes, going back to
Yeah,
the
but
question.
it's also
going back-
obsolete. You have to
no,
remember,
also-
you're using the wrong definition of. Yeah, you're not following the definition of obsolete. Like the actual definition of it, when it's been replaced, it's no longer needed.
Well,
The Swordfish was still very much needed.
yes,
and
but it
hadn't
was
been properly replaced.
okay. Then it was an out-of-date design. There, happy?
Yeah, there we go.
But anyway, going back to the question. Also,
I would
even
argue. I would argue.
The
Yeah, I would argue that it's not specifically designed to counter. It's designed to counter more modern aircraft rather than just more modern torpedo bombers generally.
even then, the 37s on Bismarck,
I mean, the
which
37.
are bolt action.
Well, I would say not bolt action. They're single shot, which is different.
I'm pretty sure they have to. No, they have a require.
You
have to
have
pull
to
back the bolt.
operate the bolt on them, which is the definition of bolt action.
No, you open the breach on them. Different thing.
Yeah.
That's not bolt action.
Yeah,
That's
Fleet. If you're
that's a-
manually opening the breach
yes.
and cycling the bolt manually,
There is no
That
bolt,
is a bolt
Foxo.
action.
There is no bolt. Breech loading big guns don't have bolts. They have a breach you open, not a bolt you work.
But either way,
Yeah, but-
since
but
they were also very bad guns, like so.
well, no, Yuki should right. Let me explain this. The M1 is not a bolt action for one simple fucking reason. Because you don't have to cycle the bolt every time you fire it.
You do.
You don't have to manually, like I said, you don't have to go into the prefix. When you charge an M1 after reloading it, you do that once until you reload it again.
Yes, because you have to
Would you-
open the breach and put a 120mm round in.
Brackman, easy. As much
Yeah, we're not talking about the 120, we're talking about the 37.
Yeah, the same principle still
Right.
applies.
right.
It's still a
As-
bolt action gun. Sorry,
As
fuck.
much
It's still
right.
a.
Anyway,
It's still a.
Anyway,
Knight.
quickly to
Knight.
cover-
Knight. The Nakajima B5NK was outdated by 1941.
yeah, because
They get-
also
they-
the officer saying that non-obsolete was Barracudas, TBMs, and B6Ns.
Yeah,
Right.
the B5N was being replaced in 1941 by the B6N. And the only reason they stick around is because of the horrific losses the Japanese take at Midway. You see less of them in 42, and they're mostly gone from IGN carriers by 43. The B5N
Also,
is an equivalent to the Devastator. Like,
since I'm assuming this is meant to be tied in, also Brackman's asking, would you prefer the older 37 or the 25 mil?
25 mil.
25 mil.
At least that puts out automatic fire.
Yeah. Like, I know we were going on about the 25 mil, was either last week or week before, but
That was Big 50. Like, we basically came to the decision that, like, while it wasn't a good gun, it was, and while
it's
yes,
what they had.
yeah, and and we had like a really long discussion about how you could in theory replace it. We came to the conclusion that you could, in theory, replace it with another gun, but you have to
But you need to start early.
and you have to be really fucking careful how you do it.
But if we talk about specifically defending against the Swordfish tanks at Sunka, the
She
best
wasn't.
weapon you could probably replace the 37, well, that caused it, that was part of her sinking, would probably be
More 20 mil.
Quad 20.
no.
Yeah.
The
I do
fully
think
machine gun now is 15 mil.
No.
The heavy machine guns the German
What?
had.
No.
In-
Why? Why would you have a
in the
smaller
triple
caliber? No. Smaller caliber
because-
when you can have quad 20.
Right.
No. Bad,
Hear me
Foxo.
out.
Bad.
Hear me out. The quad 20 for the Germans don't fucking exist yet.
Yes, it did.
Yes, it did.
Not in work. Not in usable.
Yes, it did. Bismarck carried them.
Yeah, and they were shite.
But they worked.
I'm sorry, but when there's torpedo bombers that are that low,
Also,
there's some
I
accounts of them being below the side of the ship at flying altitude. You want a
Uh,
machine gun.
I would also point out she was a single ship alone on the
Also,
high
are you
seas.
referring to the... Right, Fox, I can only assume then that you're possibly referring to what? The Machine Conveyor 151, perhaps?
Either way, look.
Yeah.
Yeah,
one
I'm
that's
sorry.
on
I
the
need to.
halfback in War Thunder.
Yeah,
no, it was only used on planes primarily.
Yeah, and also
No.
it was a land-based system. It never went to sea.
Yeah, so
Too many problems. Anyway,
the
before...
Bofa started out as that. So
Yeah,
did the
but this is-
Earlicans.
yes, but that's a different kettle of fish. Anyway, look, the point is, she was a single
The 50
vessel.
cal.
She was a single vessel alone on the high seas. To be quite blunt with you, a squadron of 8 Catalinas, each carrying 2 torpedoes, could have probably gotten off a successful strike against her because she's
No.
just one ship.
I do think that's the... In that example's a little bit too far the other way.
No,
Because they're much easily spottable, and honestly, her AA guns might work better against the Catalinas.
the problem is there's not enough DACA to prevent every single aircraft making its attack run.
No, but you don't need to stop every plane.
If you can't, no. What I mean by a successful run, I mean getting torpedoes into the water. Like
I would
this
say
is
successful runs hitting the target.
no, a successful run on an aircraft is releasing your ordnance. If you've done that, it's a successful attack run.
Mm,
And all you need is enough
okay.
DACA to break up the torpedo run so they miss, and
She doesn't have enough. She doesn't have enough to do that against 8 aircraft of any type.
yes, she does.
She's a single ship on the high seas. She doesn't have enough anti-aircraft firepower to do
Does
that.
though.
No, she doesn't.
Because a good portion of their swordfish attack profile was to minimize the amount of DACA they were taking. It's why they flew so goddamn low. If you're in a larger aircraft coming in at higher altitude,
Which the
there's gonna be
Catalinas
more
would.
DACA there.
Which the Catalinas
Actually,
wouldn't be
no.
because they'd be at lower altitude as well.
They
'cause
would have, but they still have to stay a certain level above. But because they also wouldn't have the high altitude torpedoes yet, because that was much later in the war.
Knight. We have multiple reports of B5Ns been downed by even early USNAA. The
Yeah,
F4F.
but that's
also-
a little
also-
unfair. though, so we have
also-
any reports of
also-
all planes being shot down.
Yeah. Also, Knight. The F4F wasn't inferior to the Zero, which is the different design philosophy. Also, the reasons the Kate suffered so badly was the lack of self-sealing fuel tanks. The reason the Kate suffered so badly is because they were an obsolete design.
No, I do think self-sealing fuel tanks would have helped them a lot.
They would have done, but again, regardless of the reason they don't have it, they don't have it.
all I'm going to say is there is records of 762s from Wellingtons taking down 110s. You do not need big bullet to shoot down aircraft if you get lucky.
Yeah. Thing is, the reason I say the B5N is out of date is because if we call the Swordfish out of date and we call the Devastator out of date, so is the B5N. Because they were all contemporary, and it may surprise people to learn this, they all have roughly similar speed and range characteristics. The British managed to make a biplane equivalent to monoplanes. Some fucking how.
Yeah, but I also feel need to point out that now just because it's out of date in one theatre doesn't mean it's out of date in another theatre.
Oh no, that's quite true. The Swordfish make excellent. Like, I'm talking in its role as a frontline torpedo bomber, or their role as frontline torpedo bombing aircraft.
I mean, I'd argue it wasn't obsolete by 41 then as frontline torpedo bomber, because what it's doing is attacking isolated small ships and convoy shipping.
Knight, you will point out. I've said there. Also, you're saying there's still a lethal threat to USN shipping. I did. At no point have I said these aircraft can't do their jobs and aren't
Obsolete
threats to
does
shipping.
not mean incapable.
Yeah, I'm just saying that they are out-of-date airframes that were being replaced in the various fleets. The TBD
Anyway, shall we
was
move
being
on,
replaced.
please?
Yes, we should.
Yeah, no, just for analogy for this one.
No, Fox. No, Fox, we're moving on.
I want to prove a point.
No,
Stop.
no, you don't get the last word.
Stop.
Neither of us get the last word. It's left open. It's left open-ended.
Right.
A Martin Henry might be
there's a
obsolete
lot-
as a rifle, but it will
Stop.
still punch a.
Moving on. Darth Sidious asks, how could a potential high seas fleet look if the Germans didn't make battle cruisers and focused on making qualitative quality of better battleships. Here's the thing:
Me and Clark had a very good discussion about this during the Big 50.
The Germans were already building the battleships they thought they needed. The battleship designs will not change if you stop making battle cruisers. There will just be more battleships in the High Seas Fleet. That's it.
Well, no. Also, also the thing. I would also say this is a slight alternative. They don't make it and do try and just make better battleships as well.
Well, if they do
make
that,
because they do say explicitly a qualitative better battleship.
The problem is, as far as the Germans were concerned, they had the quality they needed. This is the thing. Like you say, the problem with being as vague as that is that I have no reference on which to.
I'd refer you to the
changed,
Big 50.
Yeah, you've not changed the thinking, apart from building battle cruisers, of the officers and designers of the Imperial German fleet. You've just let them build more battleships.
Which honestly is probably better for them in the long run.
It's worse for them.
It's worse.
No, it's not.
No, it is.
Right.
Let me explain why. Let me explain why it's not worse. At least first.
Okay.
Because it's especially something that I've been hearing from a few others and do tend to agree with. Battle cruisers are excellent when they can maraud and have open seas, right?
Not in this particular case, no.
Yes.
No.
Now, what is Germany primarily in World War One?
Where are you? A land power.
They're mostly locked into the North Sea.
Yes.
Battle cruisers can do okay, but overall,
Dragon, you're fundamentally misunderstanding the role the battle cruisers play in the North Sea during the First World War.
Right.
Right.
It comes down to your definition of battle cruiser, though. Again, fleet.
Right. Okay. Right. I know. Right. So I think I know what you're getting at. Dragon's getting at the fact that to be effective in its role, a battle cruiser needs, especially if you go by the World War One definition and post-war definition, they need large areas to inflict a commerce war on. Right?
Not if you're the Germans. That's a different role entirely.
No, right. Let me continue explaining. For the German situation, initially, when they're bottled up by the Royal Navy, the battle cruisers are having to do their secondary role in the scouting fleet because they can't engage in the commerce war because the Royal Navy and the Royal Navy battle cruisers exist.
And here's the thing: if the Royal Navy is building,
I don't agree with this, but the idea is, if the Germans didn't build the battle cruisers and still focused on battleships, they could theoretically get the hulls and the balance of power to break the blockade.
No, the Royal Navy will just not build as many battle cruisers and build more battleships.
But this is in isolation. The question's in isolation.
No, I don't answer questions like that. I refuse to because it's silly.
Yeah, but
I would also partly direct you to Clark because again he'll turn up at some point this evening.
I would also point out, Dragon, that if the High Seas Fleet has no battle cruisers and Britain has battle cruisers, Britain is going to the High Seas Fleet basically never sails.
I don't think that's true
because you have no way to scout.
You do?
No, you don't, because the light cruisers...
Remind me what cruisers are?
Yeah, Dragon, the British have battle cruisers!
Yes.
Your scouting forces...
Fan of the battle cruisers.
Your scouting cruisers are going to get found, annihilated, and destroyed, and then they're going to lead the Grand Fleet onto the High Seas Fleet and stop you from escaping, because they have no opposite numbers to distract them.
Then, why were cruisers still produced and used if they were this much of a problem in these sort of situations? Why were they still used as scouting elements?
Because battle cruisers can't be everywhere, and the Germans had, and because most other fleets weren't expecting to face British battle cruisers, and they were dealing with other navies that weren't building battle cruisers.
An interesting thing is, the American ideas for fighting the Royal Navy are actually quite interesting here. Because they plan to do it initially until the Lexingtons were under construction without battle cruisers. And the idea was to minimize the amount of scouting they need and keep the scouting fleets in close proximity to a battle squadron. And try and get the battle cruisers to engage the scouting fleet, that'll then drag them into an engagement with the battleship squadron. And use this as a part of a larger fleet to essentially nullify the battle cruisers, because then if the Royal Navy knows the scouting fleet's got heavy support, they won't go after the battle cruisers.
Because keep in mind, the Royal Navy battle cruisers, it was their third or fourth priority to be part of a battle line.
Yeah.
It was almost as far down as it could be.
Even the Tiger-style battle cruisers, their primary job was the commerce war, was trade control, not battle fleet.
Yeah, cleaning.
Whereas for the Germans, the battle cruisers were much more designed to operate in the battle fleet,
and be
they
the heavy
don't have the hull,
and be the heavy.
They don't have the hull numbers to,
yeah,
basically to have a proper battle fleet on battle fleet fight,
and to provide that crucial heavy punch to German scouting forces, which they need because the RN has battle cruisers. No,
but I'd also
Germans,
say it didn't work out too well for them on average.
It worked out better than it would if they hadn't had battle cruisers. Much better.
What, one or two cruisers is sunk?
One or two.
Anyway.
Because the interesting thing is, the Royal Navy are putting their battle cruisers in the scouting squadrons and into the scouting elements was a reactionary move with the deployment of the German battle cruisers to the scouting squadron.
But that will still happen because the RN doesn't believe in fair fights. And here's the thing.
Which is why they'll bring in more battleships.
Yeah.
Or more cruisers.
Yes, but they'll also bring their battle cruisers as well.
Not if they've dispersed the battle cruisers across more of an area.
Yes, but that will only last as long until German warships across the world are wound up and sunk. As soon as that happens, the battle cruisers come home, and the High Seas Fleet basically now cannot sortie ever because they have no heavy scouting units of their own, and the British can dictate any engagement that happens.
I think you'll find Naval was a bit more nuanced than that.
Yeah, but actually, no.
Not in this case, it's
precedent for how the Royal Navy planned to use the original Implacables before everyone started looking at their own battle cruisers.
Invincibles.
And the idea behind them was when fighting a fleet that does not have battle cruisers, was that the battle cruisers would, in an attempt to circle around the actual fleet combat, and pick off any stragglers or damaged ships that are attempting to retreat.
No. Yes. Okay, I can see that.
But fairly in a role that was.
There will also be battle cruisers
occupied by frigates.
Yes, but there will also be battle cruisers in the scouting forces.
Anyway. Shall we move on again?
We will.
Royal Navy had its armored cruisers for that.
No, Foxo, you're wrong. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna have to lay my things out. You're both wrong, and we're moving on.
No, that's not how it works. But okay, hello, Sea Dotters.
Well, sorry. Let me rephrase that. I think you're both wrong, but the audience can make up their own minds.
Anyway,
it's like my autism point fleet.
Anyway, moving on. YouTube question.
Which is
Fleet being wrong about battle cruisers.
No, I'm not going to say Fleet being wrong. A disagreement of opinion on what would happen.
Yeah, a person with expert knowledge in modern history gets teleported back in time to 1940, right after the fall of France, and given control of Stalin's body. How can he end World War II with the least damage? No, after the fall of France.
So he's Stalin, right?
Yeah. Well,
that's a problem.
Yeah, you've literally put him in the place where he basically has to do what Stalin did historically, because doing anything.
Also, is this by any chance based off those Russian novels?
Yes, it is probably. Well, if it's anyone who isn't a Russian, he will probably attempt to fight Hitler, and then probably and then once Germany's destroyed, probably sow the seeds for the collapse of the Soviet Union early. If it's a Russian person, they will probably ally with the Nazis and commit mass genocide against everyone that isn't a Russian, because that's how Russians believe.
Actually, to be fair, Fleet, I do think there's a third possibility, but it's less likely. They'll try and actually stabilize the Soviet Union and introduce more Western-aligned policies.
No,
Try and basically slowly over time push it more towards West, while still.
No, because
it is still doing.
If it's anyone,
the issue is with that, Dragons. The issue with that is that the damage Stalin's gonna do, that the damage Stalin's done has already been done by 1940.
And I'll also point out the Soviet Union is still an imperial power sitting on occupied territory that doesn't belong to it.
One from YouTube. Well, I don't have a hand, I'm afraid. Basically, of someone with modern history knowledge sent back in time into Stalin's body, and just after the fall of France, was it?
Yeah. So the thing is, anybody with half a soul should realistically be looking to collapse the Soviet Union, or just restore it to being a Russian Soviet state.
Realistically, he gets murdered.
Yeah, probably.
Because like, we're talking early Soviet politics here. You fuck up once, you lose a bit of power, you get shot by the NKVD. And how rabid the NKVD was it under Stalin?
The only reason that Stalin didn't die is because he was quite literally the baddest motherfucker in the Kremlin.
Yeah.
Both literally and figuratively. How likely?
A bit controversial.
So where is it? Cvix asks. Sorry, Timu. Sorry.
No, team.
Yeah. What Fleet thinks should High Speed 2 continue to the pool of Liverpool? Well, first things first. High Speed 2. Basically, it was only High Speed 2 only needed to be built up to. Basically, first of all, what should have been done is that the money spent on High Speed 2 should have been used to massively upgrade the entire network of the United Kingdom. First things first. Because High Speed 1 to the continent makes sense. But journey times are already pretty damn tight on the East and West Coast main lines, comparatively. We're talking long stretches of 125 mile an hour plus running on both main lines, which for most of the rest of the world is very clearly into the high-speed band, and we already do that with our existing network.
They don't actually maintain 125 for that much of it.
No, they do.
It's closer to 100 for most of it.
That's still high.
Fleet, I literally have two people I talk with almost like weekly who are actual train drivers on those lines.
I didn't say that wasn't true, Dragon. You just jumped in before I could fucking finish. Anyway,
the way you were saying it again.
Anyway, as I was saying, 100 miles an hour is still above speeds for a lot of normal mainline services across the majority of the world and Europe, to be fair. If we're talking intercity services, 100 miles an hour is either average, and 125 plus is actually fairly good for intercity services. Local trains, you're looking at speeds ranging from 60 to 80 miles an hour, possibly 90 on certain sections, which is actually pretty good. That's not too bad, actually.
What are we talking about?
Should have basically HS2 have been continued to Liverpool.
I personally don't think High Speed 2 should have been built at all. The money should have been better spent elsewhere.
As someone who, almost practically staked a living on HS2 because of education, no, it very much should have been continued. It should have been, put under proper management. What I will say is
time and time again, when you increase interconnectivity between urban areas, you dramatically increase economic growth. And when the UK's per capita GDP, when you take London out of it, is less than that of most US states, including places like Mississippi and Alabama, the UK desperately needs more investment in stuff like that to help
and
increase that growth.
There's another problem
outside of the London metropolitan area.
East and West Coast main lines are all well and good, but they do keep having a number of problems, which either stops or slows them. This would have gave a third alternative for a high-speed connection,
and would create
not just to London,
corridor.
But it would create a basically Midlands corridor. Midlands is in actual middle vertically, not
Well, it was
in the middle of
actually
that way.
well. I disagree with that because High Speed 2's whole course was basically just going to be West Coast Mainline 2 Electric Boogaloo now in stores.
No, because High Speed 2 was going to be basically London to Birmingham, Birmingham to Manchester, and also Birmingham to Leeds. With intended extension to go further up to Newcastle.
Only one of which therefore basically means it's. I'll rephrase that. It's West Coast Mainline 2 Electric Boogaloo with diversion to Leeds, and then it's East Coast Mainline 2 Electric Boogaloo. So,
but that's still very useful.
So here's the thing. It ties things in better. You don't end up having to do an end run, one. And two, you now have a service that allows people, I have a meeting in London.
Yes.
I can get on the train, get there, only spend one night in London, and get back home.
You can do that already.
As long as
not
it's
reliably.
Working.
Yes, you can.
As someone...
No, you can't.
Yes,
Fleet.
you can.
You can't.
Fleet,
You can't.
I know people who have been screwed over repeatedly and now take short haul airline instead.
And
That's not
also,
the fault of the. That's not the fault of the network itself. That's the fault.
Actively.
Also, Fleet, I would also like to point out, you just disregarded Leeds, like the largest economic centre that's not dead in the north.
I didn't disregard Leeds.
You did.
No,
You did.
You did. And it's sort of like Leeds is in the state of a miniature Chicago back in the early 2010s. It's a shithole. Not quite dead yet, but if it's not, don't get its infrastructure rebuilt from literally
honestly,
Victorian shit, it's going to die.
High Speed 2 was an excellent idea, but it was just broke by tons of different mismanagement, because there was an excellent investigation into it recently a couple of years ago, where basically they went back and tracked through every project lead of the program and basically asked them the same question.
This is also
Where
the
did
one
all
that
the
had all
money
those
go?
tunnels and stuff done unnecessarily, right?
And I will also.
That's another big thing.
Yeah, I would also like to point out something that you actually have made some of my point for me, all of you. You said a lot that there are problems with the other main lines, and you are quite correct. I wonder if there was a source of cash that could have been used to fix those problems.
Nope,
in the long
that's
term.
not how it works. That's not how it
Really,
works.
that's not how government funding works.
Because those main lines currently, according to the government, don't need extra funding.
Which is a load of bollocks, and that's...
Yes, but this is how governments work.
And
So
that invalidates my argument. That invalidates my argument because why?
Because they would
Because
never
you're
have
denying
got it.
reality.
I mean, it's not gonna rebuild the lines that no longer exist around Birmingham that are needed. Because remember, a lot of the old rail lines, the land under them was sold off.
Yes, I am very well aware of the beaching. I am very well aware of the beaching Act and its effects on the British railway system. Thank you very much.
It's more than just teaching, though.
It's even worse around Leeds. A bit of money to modernise those two lines ain't gonna do shit for the places that actually need it.
You're also forgetting something. If you want to retain capacity while you upgrade a line, you can't.
I know that.
So if you want to upgrade, say, the West Coast Main Line, you need some new service to fill in, because the state of the West Coast Main Line, you are talking a 20-year project.
You are
because
right
of
there.
the state of British rail infrastructure.
You are right there.
Actually,
it's worse than the Amtrak Northeast Corridor between New York and Boston.
To go back also quickly to a point, I've just been reminded, because of spotting something. A friend of mine actually takes the West Coast Main Line every day to go to work. It got so bad at one point, his company told him, please stop trying to bother coming to work. We'll set it up so that you can work from home. Stop trusting the trains, it's wasting time. Because trains just didn't turn up. Or the track was damaged. Or something occurred.
Why is it that I seem to have the most reliable railway network round near me? What's Sheffield got going for it?
Because you're doing short distance stuff.
Right, Fleet.
I mean,
last time I was on
long
the East Coast Main Line, I was actively told, all but one train has been cancelled. It's now going to be the last train of the night. Oh, and also, there's a high chance it's not going to go anywhere.
Have I just gotten lucky with the UK railway network? Because
Quite plausibly.
I've travelled
No,
on the East Coast
the
Main
answer
Line
is-
multiple times and never had any problems.
The issue is you live around Sheffield, and Sheffield is very lucky. It
the
still
HS2 one.
maintains. It still maintains a little bit of infrastructure that used to feed Leeds.
I mean, it casually ignores the gutting of the Woodhead route and the Great Central, but hey ho. But anyway,
Yeah, but Sheffield compared to
Retains a little bit.
yeah, and Sheffield's much fucking smaller than Leeds.
one of the things I would like to
Rightfully,
say
when the
is,
local councils put money together to reopen branch lines in Newcastle because the government won't fund it.
are we? So it's not well. Here's the. You know what? I honestly maintain the only thing Thatcher did wrong with British Rail was not actually going all the way and creating multiple private companies that own the track and the trains. It was
I'm not so.
when Britain's railways
Speaking as
were
a country that tried that,
when Britain's railways were privately owned, they were the world's finest. LNER, LMS, heck, even the private companies that came before. They had pride in their networks and their systems. They ran regular freight trains that actually ran to time, local services that actually did something, crack expresses that linked the UK cities together.
They also had a lot less competition because this was all before the fucking motorways.
Well, we already saw the pinch of competition hitting them in the late 30s. It would have been interesting to see how they would have reacted to a
Not well.
world without a Second World War.
Fucking no.
well,
Well,
that has no bearing on
That
this.
Yeah.
That has absolutely no bearing
Also,
on this.
honestly,
Reality is
no,
the Second World
it's-
War happened.
Also,
The motorways are a really good way
they're still coming.
on a
anyway.
small level of getting goods around the UK. Because the UK is small enough, you can't just stick on the back of a HGV for a couple of hours.
I mean, heck, we do that here in the States all the time.
Yeah. And it's a case of any short range rail and private rail is going to have to deal with why not shove it on the back of a HGV? And as the 50s proved, after the demobilisation and the market got flooded with large 6 and 8 ton trucks, and there was a massive lurch of transport through those trucks, rail nearly fucking died.
I am aware
Because
of
it just
that.
became cheaper.
I am very well aware of that.
And
That's
so-
what killed off. That's what killed off the majority of private rail in the U.S. It already wasn't doing too well, but that nail in the coffin for us,
Didn't it
and it
lead
nearly
to the
killed
first...
Amtrak.
Didn't that whole growth in private truck ownership in the 50s and 60s lead to the first wave of mass mergers in the US?
It wasn't just that, but yeah. And it's one of the problems that unless you have a corridor like the Northeast Corridor or the stuff they're now trying to build in the Southeast, and they're working on building that Southeast Corridor and then tying that in to another corridor they want to build out to, I think, Chicago. I could be wrong, but Chicago would be what makes sense. Like, you need to build up these massive corridors if you want to do high volume passenger rail that's capable of competing. Forget freight for a second here, because to be honest, you should be separating those systems as much as you can, or the passenger service has to own the rails. That's the big lesson I have seen talked about here in the States. And you know, we have private freight rail companies. They do a lot of work, but you know what they don't do? Massive investment in their networks.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
NSF does some, CSX has done some, but nobody can compete with infrastructure investment and governments. Nobody. Because nobody has that kind of capital outside of governments.
Yes, Wellesley, this is derived from the HS2 question.
I mean,
Doesn't
I agree.
America have all that basically abandoned track from?
They gave up an entire transcontinental railway that was electrified. Fucking Milwaukee Railroad management staff, I'm gonna gut them.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the more intercity stuff where it's just rails that have been abandoned because they couldn't keep up with the highways.
Most of them are are still owned by the freight companies. There's stuff that Amtrak and state rail organizations are buying back, particularly to create what will eventually become the Southeast High-Speed Corridor. They're first aiming for 90-mile-an-hour service between cities.
Which is pretty good.
Because that way they don't have to do a bunch of crazy initial investment to get it working. But their eventual goal is 125 mile an hour and potentially higher.
Yeah. I would just like to say something that does annoy me. One of the problems I've had that with the growth of high-speed rail in Europe and China and Japan, everyone's become so enamored with speeds of 140 plus miles an hour that they often forget that 90 to 100 is enough for most intercity rail. It's
right.
It's significantly faster. It's significantly faster than a car. And you don't have
Right. So, Fleet. Let me explain. Right. I think there's also one thing you are missing here. Europe, on average, does work better with higher speeds, especially if we're going off Germany. Germany has literal major road arteries which don't have speed limits. But going even beyond that, the reason why Europe, Japan, and Asia are so enamored by 140 plus is because they have working 160 plus.
Yeah,
They already actively are working at much higher speed, which is why they want to push for this. And
are you talking about traditional heavy rail being 160 plus?
Yeah, TGVs and such.
That's high speed rail. I was more referring to traditional non-high speed rail in Europe. But no, if you're talking about what I meant was that given that most motorways worldwide have a speed limit of somewhere between 60 and 80 miles an hour, a train that can do 90 to 100 has an advantage over a road user that will likely, if they're a
by
smart
10
road,
to 20 miles an hour here in the States.
Yes, and I will point out that that's 10 to 20 miles an hour city to city without having to queue through traffic on the outskirts of both cities if you're trying to get city centre. Whereas the train will
depends on the city.
Yeah, no, yeah. I will admit, depends on the city, but that can be enough to pull some, not all, away from the car. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but it's enough of an advantage to do it.
That's not what's going to pull people away from the car.
Yeah.
It's not the speed, because then you're going to get to the city, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to have to rent a car here in the States. What pulls people away from the car is the fact that they don't have to sit in a car seat for 8 to 12 hours. They can be in a much more comfortable train where they can get up and walk around.
Also, just going off currently Europe and Asia's top high-speed stuff, you're looking 170 to 190
Dragon, I know
miles an hour.
I am someone who has more than a passing interest in railways throughout my entire life. So
but this is why the fact that that speed is very nice and much faster than you can get a car. And as Cyclic just said, what do you prefer? Sitting in a car having to deal with traffic jams all while sitting in relatively uncomfortable stuff, or relaxing in a train, reading a book, not having to worry about it, and sipping from your glass of wine, perhaps, depending on how posh you are. You just are biased because of your car.
No, it's not that. It's the fact that cars are, when you get to your location, are a lot more convenient.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's proven time and time again that people go for convenience.
Now, I'm admittedly slightly biased there because
you don't right.
Not just that, but at one end of my network, I have a local train system that gets me wherever I need. Then I've got that, which gets me straight to the station for the main lines, which gets me to wherever else I need, which is usually London, a local train system, or Cambridge, which has a local bus system.
This is the thing, this is something I will acknowledge in the UK. Whether I use rail or road depends entirely on where I'm travelling and what the system at the other end is. And I will usually drive to the train station before departing. If I'm travelling to London, or Manchester, or anywhere that has a decent light rail system or heavy rail system, I will use the train. If I'm travelling to anywhere where I don't know the buses or anything like that, I will likely take the car. Because I hate buses with a passion.
Yes. Either way,
Yeah,
I think we've very much run. I think we have
just gotta
very
point
much
out-
ran this one in. So shall we call
Yeah,
it after this Fox's comment? I guess.
But
Yes.
it's the same issue people have with buses I have with trains. Because a train is nice as long as you don't have any dickheads in the carriage with you. But like with any
Or
public
screaming
transport,
2-year-olds.
Yeah, fair.
yes, and it's a case of the car might be slightly more expensive, slower, and less comfortable, but I can control who's in it, and I can just turn the radio on. I don't have to deal with Karen 53 who doesn't like the way I'm sitting,
Meh, fair.
or
Either way.
Jonathan the 2-year-old who's crying because his mum said no to him using the iPad.
Either way, as I said, I think that question is very truly run into the ground, considering questions have slightly dried up and people keep questioning, are we still on that question? Like, it's a good question. Like, I actually quite like the fact
Also-
that Timu brought it up.
Right, it's just seed otters.
Hmm?
The Bovington Tank Museum has one of those. They use it for pulling shit around the museum.
Large
way.
lad.
Side note.
Hmm?
Who here is excited for sea power?
I
that
am.
comes out.
Naval warfare in the
Yeah.
Missile Age. I'll just do that plug for them.
I am very excited. I'm also very excited because I know that they started strong and they plan to go stronger. So everyone's like, "Oh, no British and French." I'm like, they're coming. They're on their way eventually.
What I will
Right.
say about the British is just wait.
I know. I think in particular, people
That's
were
all
more
I'm
okay.
going to say.
I
Oh
think
no, yeah, just
it was
wait.
more
Yeah,
not just a case of
I
where
I have
British. It's
a little
why
bit of vision
smaller
in that.
nations over British.
yeah. Like, given that this, I will just say this. I mean, I don't know, but I'm just going to speculate for a second if I'm allowed to. The Russians have a Karabar carrier, which obviously is something they didn't possess in real life. Now, I have a sneaking suspicion, just a hunch, that Britain may also possess a modern Karabar carrier, a CVA-01.
Well, so Oriole, by the endpoint of the game, which their time frame endpoint is 1983, Oriole isn't all that modern. Particularly in her air wing, looking at the MiG-23s that are navalized. Rip going up against a Tomcat.
Yep, good luck.
Or even a Phantom, honestly, of the 80s. But I think a British Katobar carrier is going to be handled a different way, given that they're also looking into the early missile age
Oh my.
as well. They don't currently have that in the dev builds you're seeing. I mean, they have some ships, like they have a Galveston class with Talos, but
Talos, aha! Pole be upon you!
well, it's also a Galveston class, so it still retains 1,666. And a twin 5-inch 38 forward. But,
Oh, I'm waiting for a Des Moines.
I don't know if you'll see Des Moines, because the game is in the missile age.
Yeah, I think Des Moines served in Vietnam.
They did,
Not more of a technicality though.
but, like, what I will say is we'll see.
Oh, yeah, like, I'm just spitballing. I'm not gonna. I
don't
refuse
think
to.
those are priority. Like, I honestly, I don't think the Des Moines, I don't think the Forrest Shermans
Yeah.
are that much of a priority.
Oh no, I did.
Even though the Forrest Sherman's a little bit better at ASW than some of the early Frams, and they have those.
I completely agree with you, Cyclic. But I do think that when the modding scene opens up, as it inevitably will, we're gonna see all sorts of nonsense.
I can tell you we're going to see the friggin' nuclear shells for the Iowas.
Vanguard
And
will
nuclear
Vanguard
payloads
will also
and
appear. I guarantee you, the Jean Bar will appear, even if they are in weird formats.
But anyways, I think you'll enjoy the British entry. Let me just say that.
Yeah.
Should be interesting to see.
I know I will, because when that gets added, I'll do a sort of set of. I'm promising this now without knowledge fully of how the scenario editor works, but it seems to be fairly simple. My plans are to create a couple of scenarios focused around Norway, both some Soviet ones and some Allied ones. And one of the Allied ones is going to be, congrats, you're a NATO submarine hunting, hunter-killer group based around an Invincible
Whoopee.
operating in the Norwegian Sea.
Oh boy.
Because that's what they plan to do. You've got a couple Type 42s. You maybe have a Perry. You have a sprue cannon, some Type 22s with you. Here's the thing. You're a carrier. Good luck.
I know what that means. I know exactly what that fucking means, Cyclic. Oh no. Oh no.
Stuff like that happens.
I know. I am very well aware.
Did somebody
Whoops.
somebody order a can of whoop ass? Don't worry, it won't be backfires.
We swear.
No, I'm not going to be that mean.
Don't make that promise. It might backfire on you.
But
YouTube question next, Fleet.
Yes, YouTube question.
You're trying to
It's a
recover.
very, very, very specific one from Knight.
Oh,
How
dear.
likely is it that the destroyer Ayanami, had she not been wrecked hopelessly in a lopsided fight with USS Washington, that she would get new turrets that have a mounted with a maximal elevation angle of 75 degrees and Type 21 and Type 22 radar? It could happen.
maybe some of the radars, but probably not the turret refits by that
as
stage
in-
of the war.
Yeah, I'm assuming you're referring to the Fubuki class. Yeah, definitely the Fubuki. Yeah, definitely not turrets, and honestly, probably not the radar, really, but maybe.
Yeah, they're all destroyers of the Fubukis by that point.
Yeah.
So,
what's called Ayanami has stealth 30.
Fubukis did get the radars. Some of them. They were kind of hit and miss on where the radars went. Some ships got radar direction finding equipment.
Damn.
Which actually led to a U.S. defeat later on in the Solomon's campaign.
Cycling. I just like a quick. I didn't realize that the Japanese had radar direction for any
Yes,
of
they
their guns.
did. They didn't. It was very hit or miss what ships were on, because remember, the Japanese were not in mass producing this equipment. Radar direction finding equipment. They just weren't.
You would have thought it would have gone to the battleships, not the destroyers.
So around that time period, they needed it on the destroyers, because this is the Solomon's campaign. So post Guadalcanal, but Solomon's campaign. You're dealing with fighting in very restricted waters, knife fighting at night. Torpedoes are going everywhere from both sides, right? It's a destroyerman's fight. It's cruisers are honestly questionable in this fight versus just sheer numbers of destroyers. When the U.S. starts winning there, it's generally because we're deploying 2 or 3 Desrons backing up 2 or 3 Clevelands.
Nice.
And we start opening the attacks with our own torpedoes, waiting for the torpedoes to get hit or us to get discovered, and that's when the gunfire hits. And woe be you to be downrange of a Cleveland when it's throwing 6-inch guns. But
I mean, that's just I cast destroyer removal, that area.
And this is a time period where the Fletcher swarm is really starting to hit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The Guadalcanal campaign, they're rare. Later on in the Solomons, you're starting to see the waves arriving. And the U.S. is also learning, hey, maybe we should let these destroyers do what the doctrine says they should. Rather than holding them in close as trying to screen away the enemy destroyers, how about we send them out? Get out there. Best defense is a good offense. Get our torpedoes in the water so that their return shots are the panic just return, and then they have to turn. Or we've crippled a good chunk of their formation. But yes, you do see in some of these engagements radar direction finding equipment showing up. And some of these destroyers did get outfitted with radar. It was vastly inferior to the US, and it was just a search. It wasn't a radar gunfire control system. Which, to be fair, in those early Guadalcanal fights, there wasn't much radar gunfire control. There was some, but they could really only use it to establish the range to target.
Yes.
And a little bit of the bearing. Most of the time, for the gun laying, they had to use the optical. systems on board these ships, including, the big night fight with Lee. We were still using a lot of optical fire control in those fights. And it's one of the reasons why there's the confusion and stuff like that. There's also a problem with how Washington's radar was installed per B. Ward. They didn't listen to the crew's ship. So she was blind to her rear.
That pissed Lee off, didn't it?
It didn't piss Lee off as much as it pissed off the radar officer on board Washington. That man was arguing back and forth with Buard over it. Because the captain of Washington doesn't get enough credit. A lot of people go, oh, it was Lee that trained that ship up. Before Lee got to her, she was already one of the best gunnery ships in the fleet.
Nice.
That crew was hot shit on their jobs because of that captain.
Nice.
And so Lee gets there. He's meeting with the fire control officers. He's meeting with the gunnery officers. He's meeting with the radar officers. He has additional screens set up actually in what would have been his bridge quarters. So, if he needs to sleep and needs to rush to the bridge, he can sleep there. And what would have been that, he turns that into kind of a proto-CIC. It doesn't have all the plotting and all of that, but it's got the repeater screens, and that's where he is during these engagements. If I'm understanding Partial correctly. And that's why he has that situational awareness. And there's this great line. I can't remember what point of the battle it is, but they've detected the Japanese. Lee, being a chain smoker, takes a drag on his cigarette, breathes out, looks at the captain of Washington, and just goes, "Here they come." And I believe it's at the point where Washington is the only ship left.
Damn.
This is right before she opens up on Kirishima.
That's badass.
Lee was a bad mother trucker. Oh. But you hand a Kentucky sharpshooter 9 16-inch rifles. I mean, you know what's going to happen.
Big kaboom. Probably.
Well, given Kirishima had a hydrogen explosion in one of her magazines as she went down, or was on the bottom. Yeah.
Right.
So gunnery officer, it was the first half of the Japanese force, which was just Sendai and some destroyers. It was a light cruiser and not even an inline gun light cruiser. It wasn't an Nagano. It was one of their older, more World War I style light cruisers.
Yeah, they were very out of date.
Yeah. Right. So, YouTube Discord question. Cevix asks, so, Force Z, but with the addition of a 1 Dido and 2 M-class destroyers, would it make a big difference in the fate of this task force? You've added Dakar. However, you've not added enough... Well, it depends. It's one of those things that I can't really say. I always like to hedge on the lower side of changing history. So I always like to hedge and say, I don't think that's enough Dakar to save the ships of 4C. But you never know. Maybe that Dido class makes the aircraft that lands the torpedo hit on Prince of Wales that damages her shaft not launch its torpedo. Maybe the 2M class...
And are we talking one of the fully armed ones or one of the partials?
I would assume one of the full five gun ships.
Yeah, one of the full 5 gun ships.
Because most of them had 5.
I mean, you're up against bombers. I mean, it could help change the course of the battle. And help force you get out of there, but
problem is
the other problem you have in terms of breaking up the incoming Japanese air attack, because that's what really matters for these torpedo bomber attacks, is your medium AA have no tracer, so they don't see the incoming rounds. That matters a lot.
The M's might actually have functioning tracer.
Yeah, but that's only the 2 destroyers.
The Dido might also, but the 2 battleships.
You need it
probably
fleet-wide,
yeah.
And
Also,
it's really going to help on the
another
battleships.
problem here is you had to choose the M class, didn't you?
I mean, the M's have. Oh well, it's either
the M's are the ones that they have the new. The L and M's have the new turret, and it is an amazing gun for anti-surface.
It depends if it's the 4.7. If it's the
4.7.
If it's the ones with the 4x2 4-inch, that's going to be excellent.
It's the M class.
4.7, isn't it?
M class were built with 4.7s primarily.
Yeah.
In fact, yeah, I basically can't see anything where the M class that didn't use 4.7.
Yeah, so the M's
4.7 gun in
4.7s.
particular is the 4.7 50 cal Mark 11, which is known for having incredibly slow transverse and very limited maximum elevation setting.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, it's really not very good at shooting planes.
I mean, if they manage to get them pointed at the bombers as they come in, they'll do some work. But once the bombers are amongst the fleet, that's when you're going to have problems, and it's going to be over to the light AA of the ships to actually.
And when you go beyond that, they've got 1 quad pom-pom, 2 single Orlicans, and basically
a bunch of 50 caliber
Vickers machine guns.
Yeah, 50 caliber machine guns. Yeah.
This is
not fun.
That's not going to help.
Yeah.
The Dido might at least provide some useful support, but just not enough.
Yeah. So that was a Discord YouTube
again.
Rune asks, someone causes Hirohito to spontaneously combust while he's giving the go-ahead for the 1937 invasion of China. What happens next? Nothing different, because Hirohito didn't
army
give
does it anyway.
Yeah, Hirohito wasn't the one calling the shots by 1937. In fact, Hirohito wasn't the one calling the shots in Imperial Japan ever until the end of the war.
Yeah, he didn't call any of the shots. He called the cessation of shots. And he wouldn't have been able to do it in 37.
No. If he dies...
He would have been told to go sit back in the palace and be quiet.
And go and... What was it he was fond of? Fish? Koi? Carp, I think? Like, that was his hobby?
Also archery, I think.
Yeah.
But
yeah, like, if Hirohito spontaneously combusts, there'll be incredible confusion in the government, but that will change literally nothing. In fact, you've not really changed the course of history.
It might make things worse.
Yeah.
It might just be, amateur arts did not favour him. Game.
Yeah, and then another member of the Royal Line will take over. Probably
Alright, I think we've beat this one to death.
Alright. Okay. Admiral Wellesley asks, I've actually been waiting for this one because it's actually a decent alt history because it's not stupidly wide. You are now in charge of the Yugoslav Navy in 1930. You are to procure ships to defend the Yugoslav coast. Money is not an issue as some unknown incredibly rich person will fund it all. What do you do? Keep in mind the infrastructure of the Yugoslavian Navy will not be able to get upgrades. Actually, assume the infrastructure can support ships of up to 15,000 tons. And let's say 3 dry docks are capable of this. Okay. So I know that I know at home that the Yugoslavian Navy can build destroyers and submarines. They are capable of this. So... first thing I'm going to do is, because I'm not a signatory to the Washington Naval Treaty, I am going to go to probably the... If it's 1930, and I'm actually being funded for this...
You can't go to any of the signatories to get them to build you anything larger than destroyers.
The Spanish... what about
cruisers?
15,000 tons, yeah, that's the point. Well, in that case...
And you can get them to make you some very good cruisers for the era, because you have that higher tonnage limit. But...
Oh, well, in that case then, I'll order I'll basically go, because this is about the same time the Spanish Navy orders the Canarias class heavy cruisers.
I mean, what I do is that Argentine light cruiser that's sort of. Let me look up when she was ordered, but it's like just a straight up better Leander sort of deal.
Yeah.
See here, I gotta go back in time a bit. I know Drac covered her a while ago.
La Argentina.
Yeah.
So while that is, yeah, because
She was a very good light cruiser.
Yeah. So.
And that's going to be helpful in Yugoslav's home waters.
Yeah. So, for 15,000 tons, what I might do, I'm gonna go to the Swedes.
Oh gosh.
I'm gonna go to the Swedes, and I'm gonna say, I'm basically gonna go to the Swedes, and I'm going to say, hang on, let me just check something real quick. How big are you? Right. I'm going to go to the Swedes, and I'm going to say, right, what I want you to do is I want you to take your Sverige class, which is about 7,700 tons fully loaded. I want you to increase the displacement to 15,000 tons. I want you to have a pair of triple 11-inch of those nice 11-inch 45 caliber guns you build, Sweden. And what I want you to do is I want you to build me 3 of those, please. Because that then means I've got 3 ships that are, and ideally build them to resist Italian 12-inch. So a lot of the displacement is not going into speed or extra armament. I'm only getting an extra pair of guns. It's going into armor. Because the basic premise is to basically...
That's sunk by Italian frogmen in port.
Probably, but the thing is that require... Yeah, but that's but it's also part of my... It's one part of my deterrent plan. So if I get 3 of those... Because that then means that the Italians have to think battleships to bring anything to bear against me. Then...
Which they have.
Yes. No, they do. That's true. But... This also then ties into my next thing. I will then come up with a plan so every 20 miles, give or take, I'll find a coastal village or a coastal town to put
the ports to do that don't like the anchorages to do that don't exist. Like that's the problem. You can't just find a coastal town.
No. You didn't let me finish. And then I'll set up nearby a MTB base with about 4 to 6 motor torpedo boats. And then,
you're still not going to have that every 20 miles, even every 40, but you should be able to find enough spots to have a reasonable...
Yeah, I was going off of, it's not meant to be an exact number, it's more just enough spots along the coastline that there should be some MTBs nearby if shit hits fan. And then for the final thing, I want 12 large modern destroyers. Heck, I might even...
disappear for a bit.
Heck,
So
I might even...
a little bit, really.
Heck, I might even go to the US and buy 12 of their latest and greatest destroyers.
That would be a bad idea. That would be a bad idea.
What?
They are not stable. They are woefully not stable.
Well, I mean, to be fair, it's more just like I'd basically just say I'm not.
By the way, you have Phoenix in physical pain.
Yeah. No, what I mean is when I said their latest and greatest, I meant I'm gonna go, hey US, I know you're building this. I'm gonna basically take the tonnage limits off you and say expand this for me, and then build me 12.
I would go to the Brits and order tribals. That'd be me.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, I'd probably order tribals with twin 4-inch just for that dual purpose capability.
But
rather than twin 4.5.
I mean, they were more than good enough. I'm going to quote Phoenix here so that people who aren't in the Theater at CTEX chat can see it. Yugoslav Navy throws all their money into 15,000-ton coastal defense ships. Italian Navy. Well, at least they made their navy as ineffectual as possible.
Well, the thing is, if I build 3 15,000-ton heavy cruisers or large cruisers, they can't break out.
He can hop into voice right now.
The reason that I went with coast defense ships, or one of the reasons I went with them, is that if I built, let's say I go to the Swedes and ask them to build me 3 15,000-ton large cruisers armed with, I don't know, a new 9-inch gun, 9-inch guns, and resistant to 8-inch shell fire on their entire belt length with a narrow band over their magazine, over their engines to resist 12-inch. Let's say I ask them to do that. These cruisers are still as vulnerable in port. They can't break out of the Adriatic in any meaningful way, because the Italians will be waiting for them.
So why are you building cruisers?
Because the problem is, I have unlimited money, and I have 3 15,000-ton capable yards, so I may as well build something to complement the destroyers, light cruisers, and submarines I want to build.
So the ultimate problem you're going to run into as Yugoslavia is really, I mean, granted, this scenario is trying to hand-wave away some of the infrastructure issues, which I think does not really jive with a lot of the limitations on what kind of natural ports and harbors you get on Yugoslavia's coast. But really the core issue is big units do not do well in the Adriatic at all. This is one of the big lessons of World War I. You just put a battleship or armored cruiser at the Adriatic, it's not going to have a good time. This is why, ultimately the Italians, their strategy for dealing with the Austro-Hungarian Navy was just drown them in lots of flotilla craft and, just oppress all their traffic until they really can't do much in the way of coastal traffic, because there are just moss boats everywhere. I mean, this is kind of the fun of when Sven Istvan was sunk in that last Austro-Hungarian sortie. It was kind of emblematic of this, because it wasn't like these two moss boats were out for a special mission to hunt down the Austrian battleships or anything like that.
They were just there. They were just there.
They were just there on patrol because that was just normal for that point in the war. That, Italian moss boat were in Austro-Hungarian waters, and boom, done.
Alright.
Battleship ambushed. So
I think
if you're looking at, say, the historical strategy of the Yugoslavs, right?
Yeah.
They understood that basically nothing they did was going to help them because they were just doomed. They wanted to invest in flotilla craft, but the Italians had swarms of flotilla craft, especially when you're talking about the 1920s and 30s, when so much of what was in service in World War I is still left over.
Yes.
So they opted to go procure larger destroyers from the French because their idea was, if we are going to fight with anybody, we're going to be fighting with the French. This was like kind of the main dynamic of the Mediterranean for all the navies involved.
Yeah.
It's the idea of like a Franco-Yugoslav combination against the Italians, right?
Yeah.
So that's why they built large destroyers from the French. They could operate with French ships. If they had to operate away from Yugoslavia, that would be the base. They would at least be able to work well with the French. And also that these larger destroyers would be the best options against a lot of the Italian light scouts, because any normal destroyer is just going to get outgunned by a Leone, Navigatore, or anything like that. So we build a few larger destroyers. They will at least have a chance if they get caught out in a quick
completely
action with a couple of these
And
ships.
You have a couple of them with some more torpedo-focused destroyers, and
So
but
I'm
the
just
ultimate
pretty scary
recognition was
task
just
force
the
in
fact
the waters of the Aegean.
So I'm
the
just
ultimate recognition was the fact that there was just always going to be far more Italian craft regularly at sea than they could actually manage. And their own ports were going to be vulnerable to attack. There was not a lot they could really do.
I've just had a thought. I think I need to build 2 fleets. And hear me out. So, one fleet is the fleet that's designed to attempt to defend Yugoslavia. That's probably 8 large destroyers, probably tribals, and 2 flotillas.
Tribals are going to get clobbered.
2 flotillas.
Italian scout.
Yeah, 2 float. Well, I thought you. No.
I'd forgotten about the Italian scouts.
Well, it depends if it's the Italian scout cruisers, the tribals.
Tribals did quite well against the Italian scouts in hindsight when they're in the Royal Navy service.
Yeah, if it's tribals.
So this is one of those things you got to be specific with the context, right? Where the tribals mostly clashed with Italian destroyers was night actions where they were attacking convoys, basically. So where the Italians have no situational awareness, the British are very well trained in night combat. They also have the initiative because they're an attacking, defending force, and that force is having to deal with the complicated factor of defending a convoy. This is before CICs or anything. It is very hard as a defender to really organize an effective defense on the fly when your first warning of an attack is when the first salvo goes out. So these are fairly one-sided actions, though there are a couple cases of mutual
Where the
kills.
Italians detect them coming in and fight them off.
Yeah, but this is also the Royal Navy, and we're talking about the Yugoslavs who, granted, I mean, obviously we're making a whole scenario up where infinite money, so obviously they could probably do more if they wanted to, but very few navies really focused as heavily on night combat. Really, if you're looking in the interwar period, it's really the British, the Japanese, and the Germans who focus on it more heavily than anybody else. I mean, the French and the Italians and the Americans aren't ignoring it by any means, but
Yeah.
it's just a different context for how they do this. I mean, because
Yeah.
this is one of the things where, like, even if you look at the Italians, even night combat is like there's a lot of bad history on this that basically says, oh well, the Italians just didn't train for night combat. They didn't expect to fight at night, anything like that, which is just grievously wrong. It's true for the heavy units like the battleships and to a lesser degree the heavy cruisers. But for flotilla craft, like destroyers and torpedo boats, that was actually their primary offensive period. It was night combat. In fact, in the early war period, before you really get a lot of the regular convoy actions going, about 8 out of the 11 night actions that are fought in the Mediterranean from the start of the war to about May 1941. Of those 11 actions between the British and the Italians, 8 of them are actually initiated by the Italians attacking British forces at night. So
Yeah.
they were. This is something that they sought to do. It's just again for these specific type. And this is kind of what you'd expect in an Adriatic context, right? The only case where they're really going to be probably defending convoys is if it's traffic across to Albania, right?
Yeah.
Which was the thing that was done because of the invasion of Greece and supporting the Balkans later. But against Yugoslavia, the Italians are more likely to be the ones on the offensive because, especially if it's a single war, they have all the time in the world to destroy the Yugoslav Navy. But if it's a war with another power, then they are motivated to crush them as rapidly as possible.
Yeah.
So they can concentrate against either the British or the French,
Yeah.
whoever it happened to be.
Yeah.
Obviously, historically, it was mostly the French, but
Yeah. I do have a few things that I do want to say.
Mhm.
Bearing all that in mind, I do actually have an historical example that I can draw on for. So you mentioned I said I was building 2 fleets, right?
Mhm.
So now there's another fleet. There's what I call the fleet in exile. So I will still build my 3 status symbol cruisers, the 3 15,000-ton large cruisers. But what I will do is, because assuming that nothing else is going to change outside of Yugoslavia having a larger fleet geopolitically, I will basically have them ready to, as soon as it becomes clear that shit's about to hit the fan, we basically pull a Polish navy. And they basically start making 33 knots out of the Adriatic as fast as their turbines can carry them, headed for
Then you need
Alexandria.
range.
Yeah, exactly.
Weren't you just saying you weren't going to worry about range?
No. That was for the coast defense ships. These are the large cruisers. No, the large cruisers will have range. And of course I can sell that by using them as ships to show the flag.
I mean, the problem is ships to show the flag. They're not going to be very good at it because there's 2 major naval powers in the Mediterranean. One of whom, they're your ally. The other whom is your threat. And they're both rocking around with battleships.
No, I'm aware. Yeah, no, completely.
Well, this
But-
is just an excuse to have them. But,
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
like,
it would really depend on, like, if you know you're going to be fighting with France and you can have them based out of, say, French ports, then that works really well. The only problem is in a vacuum. Let's say if it's a war with only you against the Italians, then there's really nowhere for them to go.
yeah, this only works
It's
if...
very alliance dependent. Just granted,
Yeah,
I mean,
this
Yugoslavia
only-
kind of understood that we're going to be dependent on alliance to survive. But,
Yeah, like, this is me using the fact that I am fleet from 2024 in 1930. I know the shit that's gonna go down.
I mean, with that, I wouldn't want to build these ships. And the reason why is the air attack. You're just far better off dispersing as many units as you can across your limited ports, and that means destroyers. And when at sea, destroyers tend to be, particularly against the sort of high-level bombing you're going to see initially, at the period where your navy actually has a chance to do something defensive.
Yeah, well, I mean, the other thought would be if you're going to have them break out, you have to do it before the start of the war.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they'll just be caught and destroyed by the Italians in the Adriatic or the Strait of Otranto.
Yeah,
There's really
all the
no way
Italians
around
have
it.
to do
Assuming
is
the Italians don't
cap that
preemptively
with
sink them,
battleships.
which they kind of sort of might have done with the Greek cruiser. Not that it was really a relevant Greek cruiser, but they did sink it before they actually declared war, which is a bit of a diplomatic oops. But
What, right hand not talking to the left hand?
yeah, there's some debate as to whether or not
Get the gestures mixed up.
The shot actually was authorized to sink. Zara, I think the problem would be that they wouldn't have the aircraft available. Granted, I assume if infinite money, granted, they could do a lot of things for their army and their air force, but if it's just for their navy, it's kind of a different story. But that's
I mean, the thing is, if I am the head of the Yugoslavian Navy, can't I found a naval air arm? And
so here's the thing:
how the authorization for naval air power worked in Yugoslavia, to be honest. So that's a good question.
Yeah,
so here's the thing: if you're Yugoslavia and one of your branches has infinite money, the smart play is to go, congratulations, you are now giving money to the other service.
Yes, exactly.
Because your navy is strategically, honestly, pointless.
Oh, I know. Like, I'm trying to make the best of the situation. Like, I know full well that if I realistically, there's fuck all I can do. The only reason that I want to order these big 15,000-ton ships is that I'm basically going, I can't use these, but if I manage to run with all three of them to Alexandria, that's a great asset for the Royal Navy in the Med. 15,000-ton super cruisers in the Med, just aha.
I mean, it both is and isn't. I mean, it's helpful, don't get me wrong, but particularly if France goes kaput.
Yeah.
The problem of having to sustain these ships.
Yeah, the other problem is that
just think of how many French
you're talking French Swedish 11-inch guns. Like, nobody's gonna have the armaments for that. They're now in the British Royal Navy. That puts Sweden in an awkward spot for ammunition. They're outside the British logistics.
Just think of how many French ships, for example, were rearmed with British armament where they were operating with the Free French, right? Or just for the British.
I mean, I suppose if they're carrying Swedish
Dutch
9-inch guns, there's plenty of room to actually fit in British 8s. Realistically.
Yeah. Well, if it's a 15,000-ton fast and long-range cruiser, I don't think you'd have 9-inch guns to begin with. But
yeah, you're probably right. Swedish 8s are probably a good idea. Because then I can easily swap them for British 8s.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, I mean, honestly, really, for Yugoslavia, your optimal strategy really is just having lots of coastal minefields.
Oh yeah, and lots of MTB.
Coastal artillery to protect them, and motor torpedo boats, and then pray to God that the Air Force holds up. But,
I know, I'm not
send about half of that infinite money to the Air Force. And coastal minefields. Shallow water coastal submarines, MTBs, and destroyers like that, and the destroyers are largely there to provide cover to your MTBs.
Yeah, and ideally you just really make yourself such a pain in the ass. The Italians don't really want to deal with you if they have to deal with somebody else, and just hope that means they don't actually declare war on you in the middle of everything else. Historically, obviously the Yugoslavs were kind of surrounded by the time they actually did get involved in the war, but there was a lot of, espionage involved in that one. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, historically speaking, obviously with infinite money it's a different story, but historically speaking, the Yugoslavs did not get any of the actual decent naval infrastructure out of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was basically all concentrated on the Istrian Peninsula, and all of that went to Italy.
The other thing is, you may have infinite money, you do not have infinite time.
No, that's very true.
Or people.
And you may have the money to queue up these infrastructure projects to support this great big old fleet, quote unquote. But A, most of your borders are land. B,
I mean, if I
You
had
need people for that.
yeah, I mean, if I had
And
infinite
C,
money,
you just do not have the time to
No.
complete these infrastructure projects.
no. If I had infinite money, I'm throwing it at the Yugoslavian army and air force and saying, "Let's go all monoplanes and let's mechanize it. Let's motorize the army."
Well, the problem with that is you need fuel.
This is one of
It's
those
the
things
sort
where
of other problem with this Navy idea.
Yeah, that's true.
it's-
Yeah, I know.
it's
I'm
very unfortunate
I'm
and
trying
very
to make
bad
the best
spot.
of a bad situation, lads.
Yeah.
I'm trying my best. It's not working because it's an unworkable situation.
Yeah, people tend to forget the fuel problem in World War II, which is also something I have seen people mention. Well, in World War II, they didn't care when tankers got sunk for environmental reasons, and it's like talking about like now, and
What's the relative size?
Yeah.
and you're looking at like one modern crude tanker carrying like an entire convoy's worth or more from World War II. It's nuts.
Yeah, because it's like, yes, this large tanker, and it's like 10,000 gross register tons. It's like,
And
wow, well, that's
then
not
you
so much.
then
now,
you
is it?
look at the modern like ULCCs or
Like, how many World War II
VLCCs, and you're
tankers
like,
did they carry on top of them? Really, is the question.
while they're fully
Why?
loaded.
It's a lot.
I'm just having a conversation with Knight. He's saying that apparently I am affected by the treaties, even though I'm Yugoslavia ordering from Sweden. And and it will cause the Italians to respond to me having 3 large cruisers, which will then cause the other powers to respond.
Actually, hang
And
on.
that
I know the British went after. They did. Neither country was party to the Washington Naval Treaty, but the British did chase down a lot of the other countries around the world that could feasibly supply naval ships to get them to agree to various agreements, including the Swedes. I'm pretty sure. Hang on a second. Hang on. Let me see if I can find anything really quick.
I mean, and Knight says the 15,000 cruisers are too powerful. Italy will respond with a counter. Maybe. Or maybe they won't because
Well, the thing is-
because they're in the Adriatic and the Italians have battleships and
Well,
they're
thing
in
is,
the Adriatic.
Italians, there's nothing that says the Italians can't respond in the first place. Because here's the thing, right? Under the Washington Naval Treaty, the Italians and the French are both given 70,000 tons to use early for their capital ships. Now, obviously, everybody looks at tonnage and says, "Oh yeah, 2 35,000-ton battleships. Okay, they can lay down 1 in 27 and 1 in 29." But that's actually, I forget, is it lay down or actually have them in service by then? I forget. Regardless, these don't have to be full-size
No,
battleships.
they don't.
The Italians
And
did
They can make
consider, like,
Dunkirk likes.
Yes, and in fact, when the Dunkirks come along, the Italians could use that as the perfect excuse to build ships like, oh, we're just matching the French to deal with the Dunkirks.
I mean, that is what
And-
they did historically. Don't forget. I mean,
Yeah, I
if you
know.
look at
The Notorios.
the actual spiral.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, no, 'cause, like the reaction to Dunkirk herself was just, okay, we'll rebuild the Cavours, and then when it came to Strasbourg following, they were like, well, just 2 35,000-ton ships, let's go. The interesting thing though is actually just in the realm of smaller battleships, the Cavours were kind of they were only the rebuild project was only actually popped up at the tail end of that process of figuring out how to respond to the Dunkirks. The original talks they were having were around having various smaller designs purpose built. There was one that's like an 18,000-ton pocket battleship on steroids that Ansaldo designed. OTO had I think it was OTO, might have been CRDA, had another like a kind of a like small battleship or possibly battle cruiser design. The internal design bureau, the Italians had a small battleship as well of like 29,000 tons. And then there's also a proposal of, hey, what if we just build a bunch of 15,000-ton cruisers using this treaty tonnage, which was something they could have done if they wanted to. It's just they didn't, because the logical conclusion was as soon as everybody else in Europe starts using their treaty tonnage, they'll just build 35,000-ton ships with the maximum gun caliber they can. So we're not going to waste time on this. We will only build maximum battleships when we can. And thus, rebuilding the Cavour class it was a last minute proposal, and it was a perfect solution for them in that context. But yeah, so I mean, they have by all treaty rights, the Italians have plenty of ability to respond to anything the Yugoslavs build. It's just a question of, do they really want to, how they weigh it relative to, say, other things in the budget, balancing the French. But it is actually an interesting question, getting back to the first thing, whether or not Sweden could sell, because if they're bound by the British, by other treaties, then they might not be able to. Naval limit treaty. Do.
Knight. They're trapped. Like, the Italians. Well, first of all, major navies aren't in the business of building counters to one-off ships or classes of ships. That's how you build a navy badly. And even then,
They're going to look at what their requirements are, identify if there's any gaps that they need something to solve, and then address those gaps.
just because 3 15,000-ton large cruisers appear, the Italians are going to look and go, okay, they're Yugoslavian, they're based in the Adriatic, we control the entrance to the Adriatic, we have submarines, aircraft, the ability to mine it, we have 4 battleships, they have no battleships.
And how many heavy cruisers do the Italians have?
I mean, to be fair, the Italians don't really. That is the one thing that might worry them, because those three cruisers are
probably not.
Yeah, I said might worry them, but probably
Because
will not.
The general assumption when you're going up against sort of these style super cruisers is, if we have to engage them with cruisers, we just bring as many cruisers as they have turrets.
Yep.
Yeah,
Although that will mean
this.
deploying the entire Italian heavy cruiser force. But well, they can do that.
Not necessarily. You can bring your light cruisers along.
That's true.
I mean, I think the most likely reaction is just going to be, well, these make interesting future acquisitions when we capture them in port. But realistically speaking, they might deploy the cruisers outside of the Adriatic for ambush. I don't know if they'd really be thrilled to put the larger cruisers into the Adriatic, depending on what the Yugoslavs have in terms of submarines and other flotilla craft. But because really the main Italian response is, because again, bearing in mind the lessons of World War I, it's really like the Adriatic is lots of confined waters, lots of mines, torpedo boats. If we really want to contain Yugoslav ships, we are going to do this with oppressive motor torpedo boat patrols, or torpedo boat patrols, destroyers.
And you put a covering force at the straits.
And of course,
you can even use some of the large scouts, the 6-inch scout cruisers, as a heavier covering force against Yugoslav destroyers. And then just the other thing is, you can do things like kind of nefarious pre-war offensive mining, right? Just basically force the Yugoslavs to have to start demining or mine sweeping if they want to actually break out, which gives you more notice as to when they're going to break out. Or you send in special forces to go into their ports and sink the ships in the first place. It's something they already developed for the Austrians, because remember the Austrians would just keep their battleships in port almost the entire war and never wanted to risk them. So the Italians were developing all kinds of means to actually penetrate into defended harbors and sink those ships. Now, historically speaking, in the interwar period, a lot of those skills kind of a lot of the development on that stalled out because there was no obvious threat to do that against, because they could match the French conventionally.
Oh, Dr. Clark's here.
And then when it came to the British, only with the Abyssinian crisis, when the threat of the British popped up, did they really start opening the book on this. Though they did stall out almost immediately after the end of the crisis, and so in order to save money, and then they didn't think about doing this again until the crisis over Czechoslovakia. But if you have the Yugoslavs looking at larger ships and procuring larger ships, and suddenly this becomes very, very interesting to do much earlier. So again, lots of options to deal with such ships without putting large ships into the Adriatic itself.
Yeah, basically. And Dr. Clark's here now. Hello, Dr. Clark. I'm just about to probably wrap up this question, but do you have any comments, thoughts? Have you heard most of it so far?
Yeah, basically it turns into mine laying and counter mine laying if you start fighting a war in the Adriatic.
Any thoughts on these three 15,000-ton supercruisers will cause the treaties to collapse and the Italians to respond, or will the Italians just go, we have battleships and aircraft and submarines, and they're trapped in the
And motor
Adriatic?
torpedo boats will do what we did in World War One again.
It depends how Mussolini wants to play it. Knowing he can build battleships earlier than the French, he might use it to justify increasing the size of Littorios and claim he wants to activate an escalator clause in the First London Naval Treaty, because there is a sort of escalator clause attached to it, not as much on there is on the Second London Naval Treaty, but there is enough of one that they can petition it. There is a process for them to petition for increased size. So you could increase the size. You could use it. It's more than a case of they're actually going to be scared, but whether they decide to use it to justify building something better than they otherwise would have. And the trouble is that then has an impact on everyone else, because once one person has the escalator clause activated, everyone gets the escalator clause activated.
Yeah, which
So
I
if
think
if the Italians claim they need to increase the individual size of their battleships, let's say, so he can get the Littorios at the... Let's put it this way, if they got a 4 triple turret Littorio design through, or something like that, which would have been the absolute stretch of their construction, but they could have possibly done it, considering they pretty much shut down everything to build them. Then you would see that as an expanded program for battleships, and that would expand the definition, which would... as always, the scenario is, whatever happens, the people who suffer worst are Germany. In any scenario. Because poor Germany is starting from zero and building up. So if the King George V's, etc., are already designed to be 40,000 tons, because that's what the Italians have pushed the standard station up to, or, you know, something more, and you've got then the American capital ships designed at that sort of tonnage, and the, you know, all these things, it just makes it more difficult for the for the Germans, and it makes it more difficult for the Japanese.
Yeah.
So basically, you know, the escalator clause, at any time you have a scenario where this sort of thing happens, the people you're making it worse for are not the powers who will be the allies in World War II.
Yeah, it's the Germans.
I forget, was it the Italians playing fun games that caused the original escalator treaty to be invoked? Or was it
that was the
Japan
Japanese
withdrawing?
pulling out.
Was the
Yeah, it was-
Japanese withdrawing? Okay.
As far as the
What's often
Italian-
forget is the Italians also withdrew. The Italians were also not part of the Second London Naval Treaty.
Okay.
And were also announcing they wouldn't be
So
part of it.
that's where I'm getting Italy
It's always-
from. Got it.
It's always blamed on the Japanese because they're the big scary ones, but it's forgotten the Italians also withdrew.
Big and
didn't
scary
sign up
until
to
you
the
look at
treaty.
the Two Ocean Navy Act, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, it's big and scary, but also, you sit there and go, you're putting all the blame on the Japanese here. There's a whole fascist dictatorship you can blame, but for some reason Mussolini's regime managed to get forgotten by so much of popular history.
Was it worth remembering? Outside of him and a lamppost?
Look, let's be honest. The Fat Boy, Fun Boy, the less improved World War II edition is not as good as the original Fat Boy, Fun Boy from the Renaissance era, but, you know, he is part of history, and he was the longest-serving fascist dictator, despite he was, the fact, the least dictatorial of them, in that, because, let's be honest, if you have in your very parliament every day people sitting up and slagging you off and telling you how stupid you are, you're not much of a dictator, are you?
No, but you're an Italian one.
Yes!
Just another day in Italian politics.
But one thing on the escalator clause, I would note, I was checking out, so the specific thing that set it off is the Americans basically said, look, Japan is going to build battleships with 16-inch guns, therefore we can invoke an escalator clause. So that seems to be what did it. I'm looking at Jordan's book on the it was March
Right.
1937. But
Okay.
Yeah, the British were more worried about what cruisers the Italians were going to build.
Yeah.
Because that was more the worry, what the Italians might build in heavy cruisers. Because the British already knew that the Italian heavy cruisers, they didn't just have a suspicion. They'd actually had an Italian heavy cruiser in one of their dry docks, and several of their naval architects had looked at it and gone, if that thing weighs 10,000 tons, then sign us up to the National Lottery.
it's actually a really funny story about that. So if you look at the various documents in terms of Allied intelligence and evaluations of foreign ships, right, and for combat instructions and such, and they seem to have, for some reason, thought, because the ship in question was Gorizia, right? But for some reason, they only recorded as that one ship is definitely not over the treaty limits. So it must have heavier armor. Therefore, when you look at the tables of, what Italian ships have what armor, the Zara's 6-inch, 6-inch, 9-inch belt, 10-inch belt, 250 millimeters. And then this must have been passed along to the Americans because it also shows up in ONI 202, which is the identification sheet for Italian ships, where Gorizia is there. She's the last Tsar in service by 42, and she has a 10-inch belt listed, which I find hilarious. And I think they thought she had a thinner belt in compensation for the thicker belt, or thinner deck in compensation for the belt. But it's just it's hilarious. I find.
Okay. So I think we've. I don't think we've so much beat that question to death as run it over with a steamroller.
But we can't go further.
Moving swiftly on.
We can always keep going.
Moving swiftly on. So this YouTube question, Knight6831 asks, why is it forgotten that ARA General Belgrano was fundamentally still armed as a World War II cruiser in the environment of the 1980s, where she is hopelessly outdated for the air threat? Because well, first of all, it's not forgotten.
She also had her AA updated to an extent. She had some CCAT. Now, for the 80s, how viable is that? But then the Brits are also running around with CCAT too, so I won't swing. I won't swing a bat around too hard.
Yeah.
Hers weren't optically guided, at least.
Yeah, but what I will say is that Belgrano was purchased for her 15 6-inch guns. That's why the Argentinians bought her, to counter the other light cruisers of the ABC powers.
Yeah, she also gave them a ship that can do surface group command.
And there's a reason why, at the time of her sinking, she's wandering around with a pair of Type 42 destroyers. And
no.
I thought...
No.
She had two Gearings with her.
She had
the
two.
Type 42s are a carrier.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well...
That, and the two Gearings try and do anti-submarine warfare operations against Conqueror. And, it doesn't work out well.
No.
Well, my understanding is that, they barely did. Like, they weren't even zigzagging or anything, and barely using their sonar. I mean...
They were... It was
not the world's hardest torpedo shot for Conqueror, let's say.
No.
And she did do appropriately, though, did use World War II Mark 8s to guarantee the kill.
I will point out...
I wouldn't have trusted Tigerfish either.
No, of course not.
But
the warhead probably would have been able to easily do the job. The problem is the rest of the torpedo.
Yeah, at that point, by a few years later, by a couple of years had gone by, it was actually fairly decent, and then
they would improve it, but at that point it was.
Yeah, I will point out that Belgrano, by the time of the Falklands War, she's been in service with the Argentinian Navy for near on 30 years. Like,
yeah, I mean, her sister had already been hulked by that point. But,
like, she is an old ship overall, and she's an old ship in Argentinian service. But she still does the role because all the ABC powers still have gun cruisers. So all the ABC powers still maintain gun cruisers. You don't see them start to get rid of them until they basically start to acquire modern, large surface combatants in the form of destroyers. Modern destroyers from various places.
Keep in mind that in the 1980s, the U.S. pure gun cruisers are still in very recent memory. Now, granted, those pure gun cruisers are the Des Moines.
Haha, 8-inch rapid-fire.
And the Soviets are still running around with Sverdlovs. Like, there's still roles for gun cruisers. Not that the Sverdlovs are particularly good ones. They're not. But
Hey,
like-
don't be cruel about the Sverdlovs. They're very pretty as posters.
they're also excellent targets for surface-to-surface missiles. At least a Brooklyn is better set up for absorbing hits.
Knight says the only reason CCAT was still around was politicians not letting the RN replace it. Welcome to the Royal Navy during the Cold War.
Welcome
doesn't
to
change
any
reality.
naval organization in the world. That could be any armed forces in the entire world.
Yeah, I mean, but what I will say is that Belgrano is a threat to the British task force. Like, if
to an extent, yes.
If she had gotten within gun range, that is, that's a horrible thought.
I say to an extent, but the thing is, the moment you have radar contact on her task group, it's going to get slammed to crap with exosets.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, most likely.
And she is going to get
have a surface
wrecked.
action group under Captain Coward, heading south towards it.
That's
a last name.
That's a name, isn't it?
We are talking. The guy basically
I did a double
took
take
that
there to
name.
see if you were being sarcastic based on the look on your face.
He did everything he could to make sure that name was basically. You would hope he was. He wasn't. In another era, he would have been a
name
tribal
like that,
destroyer
you do
captain
kinda have
and
to
been
compensate
very
for it.
happy. Yeah, he did.
How the hell
He
did
was
get that
very,
last
very
name in the
good.
first place?
What's his last name?
Oh, no, it's just I really dread to think of how somebody got that last name in the first place, right? Or how it was where it came from. But
yeah,
one does not assume good origins. But yeah, I mean, one thing that's also worth mentioning and keeping in mind with Belgrano is her task group was very much the last mop up. Like if everything goes really well, she will engage something. But the whole point of the encirclement trap was basically the carrier launches the strike to try and cripple one of the British flat tops. Then the corvettes launch their exosets from beyond the radar horizon and run the hell away. And then if all goes well, the British will be in disarray. So then the gun cruiser can go in and
Comes in and finishes off.
But by that point, the mission, like they because of the carrier not being able to launch a strike, the whole mission failed. So they were already turning around to go home. That's why it's a whole debate of her getting smacked when she was going home.
It doesn't matter.
Obviously, she
Doesn't
was still
matter,
100%
but
legitimate. Obviously, she's a 100% legitimate target. There's no debate about that, or unless you're
shouldn't be.
Yes, but yeah, that was the whole idea. Was there'd be multiple things at once, and once they couldn't set that up because old carrier, and one day you get no wind in the South Atlantic. Everything kind of fell to shit.
Yeah.
Apart from Bristol aircraft,
And
they
having
still
it.
work.
Yeah, when you're
Yeah,
trying to
what
launch
about-
bomb-laden A4s off of a light fleet carrier, no wind, and you have an engineering casualty, you're just not doing flight ops.
Nope, that's good night. That's it. Go home. Do not pass go. Do not collect 200 pesos.
I popped in here for two reasons. One was to answer some questions, and because I thought, it might be nice to come share a bit of a burden of the YouTube questions, which I know have followed me over to the lovely Fleet's YouTube as well.
Hello.
Secondly, was because some of you might not realize this, but Fleet is terrible at fundraising for himself. Now, you can afford. I have to admit, Drac has developed the masterful art of not asking for money and still getting lots of money sent to him for his history, which is very, very skilled, and is something which, frankly, we all wish we could have the talent. But
Indeed.
I think it's his voice. I think it's his sexy radio voice. I think it just does it on people. I don't know how.
Amen to that.
But
It's not as good as it used to be, but
yeah,
That electronic voice was killer.
Yeah, it's just how he does it. And then when he waggles his eyebrows as well on live stream, that just you just hear the super chat to go ching 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 after that point.
But go on, Dr. Clark.
But the point is, the Foo is currently hunting work, but is still doing all this history, and he has a patron, and he has other things, and he needs to remember to say about it. And so when I'm not here, I'm going to deputize Foxo to nag him until he says something. The reason I'm deputizing Foxo is because Dragon is nice enough. They might not be cruel to Fleet and remind him. Whereas Foxo knows that you don't have to really. If you're a really nice person, you do remind Fleet.
Joy.
I feel like I'm being shanghaied.
So
You are!
I'm
That's
You
literally
are.
what's happening!
Yeah. In the night, Foxo, I come from a long and proud tradition of having free people in front of me and announcing I need free volunteers.
Like, Foxo, I entirely expect you to affix bayonets and stab him if he doesn't do what you say.
Yes,
So,
because
I don't
the thing
like
is,
asking
and
for money,
I
I
would
feel
like
like
to-
I'm begging.
no.
That
Although
is a
I will say that there have been a couple of conversations about how to get you to the Maritime Foundation event, because it is felt that it would be good to have you there. You'd find it useful to be there.
I have no
I've had
money.
a couple of inquiries from people, and we'll see. I'm seeing what I can do.
Oh,
I'm
whoopee.
seeing what can I do on the fly for you. But it's a thing. Is it would be very useful for you to be there because it's a networking event. There's people from the Royal Navy. There's people from museums. There's people from universities. There's people from industry. Everyone there, and you can meet them and impress them, and hopefully find someone who's going to help you with things you're doing.
Who knows, maybe you'll find an Iron Brew sponsorship or something.
Look, in a nicer way, if he gets an Iron Brew sponsorship before me and Drac, there is a small chance that he gets hurt.
Yes,
The
I
blood
would.
will be spilt.
What I will say, Fleet, is if that happens, spend like 20 quid on some sort of lotto ticket or something. You're gonna need it to bribe them.
Yeah.
And you should be lucky enough that you get something out of it.
Preferably a winning ticket.
Yeah, most likely. But yeah, so since I basically have the online equivalent of a shotgun held to my forehead, so for those who don't know, on my YouTube channel, below the description, in the description of all my videos, is the link to my Patreon. And I am very, very pleased to say, folks, that I am pleased to announce that I have lowered the price of a Fleet's Fantastic Thunder Roll from $15 to $9. Now, for the price of $9, you get to have a question that Fleet has to answer first in every Ramblings ever.
Now the question is, do I get to do the Billy Mays line here?
But that's not all! When the Discord comes out, which it will come out soon, there will be special roles and events in the Discord. Spoiler alert, that's coming some point in late October, November, when a special event occurs.
Scoots just mentioned a very good point. Could you put your Patreon link in your Discord bio?
Let me just poke that real quick. Hang on. Let me just,
Cyclic, this is technically a violation of Rule 6.
Oh yeah, it is. I can't do that. Whoops.
Quote Sierra.
This is technically I'm not at fault here. Blame Dr. Clark.
I would like to point out that the person who used to do this, as I'm doing to you, to me, is called Drakenfell.
So, is that sort of by right since Drac used to do it to you? Yeah, since Drac used to do it to you there, and we're in Drac's server, and while you're doing it to me, you're saying, therefore, that cancels out the rules? Is that what you're saying? Because I don't think that's how it works.
No. What I'm saying is, I'm passing on, and the duty of doing this. So I'm doing this to you, and then eventually, when there's another naval historian coming through, and they're developing their position, I don't have to do nagging that time, you can do it.
Cyclic.
No.
What did
No.
you didn't even hear what
That
I
is the
said.
best answer.
You didn't even hear what I said.
I don't think he needs to.
Oh. But anyway, yeah, just go and if anyone does want to help out, just go and check out the stream, and the link will be there. I won't link the stream because that would technically self-promotion, and that's technically against the rules.
Just out of curiosity, Fleet, where did you get up to Discord question-wise, or what was the last Discord question you answered?
That was the long-winded discussion about the Yugoslavian Navy.
I'm sad I had to miss that one, but...
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. Seriously,
Yeah, I had
why
to
are you worrying about
to
it?
go do stuff.
Don't worry about
I'm
it.
not worried about it. It just
Good.
could be an interesting topic.
Good.
Anyway, before various people in black coats come and find me.
So, where were we? Darth Sidious asks, how widespread was centralized fire control systems in 1914 battle lines?
Not. Ooh, depends on which navy you're talking about.
I thought for the
Well,
Royal
yeah,
Navy
it
they were
really does.
decently spread, but
Royal Navy pretty much they were heading for full for all the ships. They were either due to be upgraded, had been upgraded, or were built with it. Different grades of it. They were improving them, and there were different things being implemented. The Germans were having a fun time. The Americans were heading for full upgrade. The Japanese were at full upgrade because most of them had been built with it. The French and the Italians and the Austrians. The Austrians, I think, all had it by 1914, but I'd have to check to be 100% sure on that one. But I think the Italians and the French are both a very mixed bag.
Yeah, off the top of my head, the Italians really didn't roll out like the full centralized fire control systems until during the war, really.
Yeah, I think it was about 1916 they actually had them on all their ships.
Yeah,
I think it
also
was
depends
1916.
It also depends on like which model too, because they were improving it over the course of the war. Because they're using like mixes of French and British equipment at first, and then they moved on to the domestic system that started installation later. It's a confusing mess, and my sources on it aren't the clearest, unfortunately. But
No.
Well, I think we've answered that question pretty quickly. Next.
Actually, hang on, I've got to make sure Discord is where it needs to be, and then I go over to YouTube so I know where I am. This is what happens on a fairly regular basis.
This is why you need to start. We need to get your version of Powder Monkey working well.
Yes, but that can't happen until I move hosting ramblings from here to my server, and that won't happen until I either get to 100 ramblings or the 4-year anniversary, whichever comes first, because I've made that pledge.
Goody, good for you.
Because that's
Right.
YouTube.
I'm getting a bell for dinner, so I'm off to get some food.
Right.
As you can see, I have got an evening ahead of me.
I can see that.
oh,
Yes.
oh
Some
no!
lovely things have arrived. The calyxes have arrived. So at some point, I will record tomorrow's video because I haven't yet finished recording it for today, and then I will spend the evening probably with listening to various talks on YouTube while I assemble calyxes.
Good
Hey,
luck
are
with
they-
the
are
Great
they
Swedish War.
So, are they bookshelves or?
They're all bookshelves.
But so when did they change the name? Because they used to be called Billies.
Different type.
Ah,
I get calyxes because they're better with the heavy-duty books. I've got one actually behind here. It's this type. You can't see it through here. There you go. Oh,
okay.
see? It's a nice, it's got a solid square, and they are very, very, very structurally sound and actually get stronger the more weight they have on them. Whereas billies have to be tied into the wall.
Yeah, fair. All
in
mine
the
are
case of-
tied walls, so
yeah.
yeah.
And in the case of my sister, she has managed to actually just prove there is a point at which you can get the screws to rip themselves out of the bookcase, let alone the
dear.
wall.
Wow.
Thank you, everyone. Have
Excellent.
fun.
Fantastic. I will. Thank you, Dr. Clark.
And remember, Foxo, I trust you. I entrust you with the power. Do your duty.
We've already been there, done that, got the postcard. Anyway, 1971 asks, was a MiG-23 even suitable for a carrier?
So there are problems, most of them around the engine reliability. But that certainly didn't stop the U.S. Navy from doing single-engine stuff in pre-1975. But just by dint of it being a swing wing is going to make it dramatically easier to get a Mach 2 fighter onto a ship like Oriole. and the airframe's already designed for very rough, short landing operations where you're coming down hard. But the way I would put it is I would not want to be a pilot for it, but that's because I would not want to be flying a Soviet single-engine jet off of a carrier. But that's that.
To be fair, is there any Russian naval aviation you would actually want to fly in general? Or
I mean, if you have a ship like Oriol, Su-33, but Kato Bar would be kind of nice. It'd be kind of big for her, but I mean, it's positively ginormous for Kushitsov. Like, they'd be fine. But yeah, like Sierra's mentioning, they're gonna struggle to be fleet defense fighters. Which is what a Soviet carrier group would desperately need when you start looking at the offense that the US is bringing to the frame. Even up against the British Kato Bar carriers, it's sort of a problem. But those are a dramatically closer event. And you can probably make up for that with parking a Slava next to them. Probably.
So,
I was gonna say fleet. Next question.
so it was a Discord question.
Now it's Discord.
Now, I'm actually waiting for this one because I actually have enough information now after a couple of years to actually answer this one myself. Although I'm sure Cyclic will back me up or correct me if I get anything wrong. A question: why did they, presumably the USN, keep some Baltimore-class and Des Moines-class in service with their 18-inch 55 caliber guns retained up to the 1970s, to counter the Sverdlovs and also near gunfire support in Vietnam? Basically, the reason that the US keeps 8-inch gun cruisers around, Baltimore's at first, but Des Moines long-term, into the 70s, is that a Des Moines is basically the most powerful surface warship, excluding something armed with large amounts of anti-ship missiles, in the world prior to the arrival of purpose-built missile cruisers. And for certain scenarios, she's actually better than a missile cruiser. So, for example, let's say the Chinese are causing a hullabaloo in the Straits of, between Taiwan and the mainland China. Sending a surface action group led by a Des Moines is basically shuts down the People's Liberation Army Navy in the Cold War until they're withdrawn.
I'm gonna tell you to retract everything you just said.
Always brilliant when you hear that.
I would much rather have an Albany in that environment than a Des Moines. Because an Albany is also bringing, 4 Talos in the air at once, multiple Tartars in the air at once. And those are all capable of engaging those small craft. Sorry, I don't know why my phone just decided that Google Assistant should activate. They are much more capable at defending themselves from air threat. They're really there from we've built these things, they are useful. There are some concerns in very restricted waters like the Norwegian fjords and stuff like that. There's also, support of naval landings in this period because you don't have precision or meaningful precision air-to-ground munitions yet. I mean, the best you've got is like bullpup, right? And looks at some of the attempts to use that in Vietnam. But the other thing they bring is gunnery officer. Regulus is a strategic weapon. They bring the naval landing support. They bring acting as one hell of an 8-inch artillery battery as well. Like they bring all of those, and by and large, compared to the rest of the U.S. Navy's cruisers or frigates, depending on the time period, they're a small fraction of the fleet. They're there to fill those niche roles in very restricted waters where threats can easily pop up inside the minimum range of your SAMs if you're using them as surface-to-surface weapons, because the triple Ts were all capable of. Just like a good chunk of the Soviet ones. Pretty sure even the Royal Navy SAMs can be used in surface-to-surface, as in any ship, because you can get a radar return off of that. It's a lot more difficult for land. It's why they had to do some jerry-rigging with Sea Slug on that and the Falklands. But so they fill those roles. It's a very niche role. They're cheaper than a battleship. You would see the battleships come in and out of service, sort of kind of like the old first and second rates would come in and out of service when needed. But the Des Moines would remain. The Baltimores would be used through their service lives and then retired or converted. A good chunk of them end up being converted. But it's not there for Taiwan Strait. Taiwan Strait Fleet is 100 miles wide. It's like 98 or 99, I think, at its narrowest. That is.
I mean, does the
bread and butter of a missile cruiser?
Yeah, you've got a point there. But would the IG? What would the People's Liberation Army Navy bring to bear against the Surface Action Group in the 60s and 70s then?
Subs, small craft, and shitty destroyers. Including destroyers armed with sticks or their domestic derivative, anti-ship missiles. As well as, missile boats. So you need all the defensive firepower you can get against stuff like sticks. Plus, you need the ability to operate, preferably, as many ASW helicopters as you can, because you're going to be dealing with swarms of Romeos. They built a stupid number of Romeos and Mings. And while they're not great in the 70s, yes, AWACS would be very helpful, but that's for the Falklands. But I mean, it'd be helpful here too. But in the 60s and 70s, you're talking about a load of anti-ship missiles if that goes hot. The last thing you want is a ship that's dead weight in that fight. And before anybody goes, well, Des Moines is armored. Armor does not matter. Sticks is a massive threat to an Iowa. The Iowas were factored into the design of P-15 Termit or SSN-2 Sticks. Same missile, just two different designations. There's a reason they have a chungular shaped charge, not heat, shaped charge warhead. Heat is a kind of shaped charge. They were a massive threat.
Yeah, I do have to obviously we all love and we all respect Drac. But I was listening to the Ramble is good lord, I'm applying my own designation to other shows now. I was listening to the dry dock from Sunday, and he was talking about how a modern battleship's armor might protect it from some of the older missiles. And I'm like, no.
Not anything Soviet,
Well, not anything
which are
generally.
the bulk of what's around.
Not anything
I mean,
generally.
if you're
The
talking about
other
a
way around,
helicopter-launched Piddler, maybe, but
Like
It
Harpoon.
wouldn't,
Well,
be, it wouldn't be the other way
Harpoon,
around.
if it goes into its pop-up, it's just going to wreck all of the systems you need to keep the battleship, fightable.
yeah, exactly.
And a 488-pound high explosive charge going off at sea level outside your armor belt is going to cause problems.
Yeah.
Like, those ships were not subdivided and bulkheaded thinking about, large numbers of explosives of that scale going off within the ship.
Yeah.
and even he also has to be said. When we talk about subdivision and water tightness on World War II ships, it's by modern standards, it is so shoddy. This is why you see like oh yeah, this is watertight, and then the actual places when ships are hit by torpedoes or if they're mined or such, the actual final barriers they put up against the flooding, right, where they contain it, is often considerably further away, because a lot of these bulkheads, they're watertight against water flowing against it, but a lot of them will just fail due to shock, even if they're pretty far away from the explosion itself. So, which is absolutely not acceptable by modern standards, but it's why a lot of the World War II era ships are just so much less durable than their unarmored modern counterparts. And I say unarmored in the sense of armored to reject damage outright, because realistically speaking, modern warships are still armored. It's just not in the same sense, and it's more or less to defend against splinters in key areas. Most of your robustness is just anti-shock, a certain amount of flex that you actually want in this ship, and just effective damage control.
So next I'm gonna try and pick up the pace a little bit, because I do want to finish at about 8:30, 8:45 this evening.
Yeah, and you've only got like 6 questions done for Discord.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to start.
Classic fleet.
There's a lot of them as well.
Look, I try my best, all right, and I try to give all the questions good answers. So
No one's
Sometimes
faulting.
the little
No-
engine that couldn't.
Try your best and you don't succeed.
all right, boys. All right. Keep your hair on, lads.
Right. Schnell.
Wonka Gaming asks, which adaptation of War and Peace was the best? I've
I
never
don't even
seen.
know what they are. Off the top
I
of my
have
head.
never seen any of the adaptations of War and Peace, so I can't really give a comment on that. That's a really short question, so I'm gonna give another
I think it's a
YouTube
book series.
Yeah, it's War and Peace. It's the seminal work
Right,
on
yeah.
the Russian perspective of
series.
the war against Napoleon, specifically the campaign around Austerlitz.
Yeah. I'll be honest, Jeremy. I think it's a book series. Is about as good as I could give you for that one.
But apart from that, I don't know much about it, so I can't really give a comment on that one. So I'm gonna give
It's a
another
very, very dry read. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. As for the adaptations, I don't really have much to say on it. So Knights, I will give another YouTube question, because that was a very short one. So 96831, would it be right to think the Sovietsky Soyuz class would not have been the same, as their design would have changed over the 3 batches of 5? Honestly, yeah, I think that's actually quite right. You'd have you'd have what I'd call the prototypes, which is the first set of 3 built. Then you'd have batch 1, and then batch 2, with kinks being worked out as they go forwards.
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, we have the historical example, right? They actually did work on iterations of it while they were building them, because they realized, wow, we actually built or designed a really flawed battleship. We shouldn't actually build more than like 1 or 2 of these. And so they started working on, I think it was like 23NU, I think it was called. I don't have the list out in front of me. And then they ultimately just gave up on the design entirely.
Why not 23 and me?
Oh, dear God. Well, if you want to give your DNA away and such for a company for advertising purposes, you can do that. But anywho, and this is ultimately also why they just dropped the design entirely in favor of Project 24, which obviously never got built. But this is also one of those things where just, even without the Germans invading, reality was catching up with that ship design, and also the reality of where Soviet shipbuilding was, or rather where it wasn't. If you read over the saga of how disastrous the project behind actually building the first 4 battleships that were laid down was, it's a project management nightmare material.
Didn't they do similar with the Krevaks? Because the Krevak 4 or 5 had very little to do with the original Krevak.
They're different. That's a different. That's a whole different thing.
Okay.
It's for different reasons, and it's basically taking a whole design. It's kind of like the Burke Flight 1s, Flight 2s, and Flight 3s. It's like, we got more room in the hull. We can do this. We can do that. Or in the case of some of them, they turn them into like the equivalent of Coast Guard cutters. So just derivations for different roles, mostly, or modernizations and continuing to build the same hull.
Okay.
Okay, so Discord question. Since the British used the terminology of cruiser, to be gunning officer, sorry. Since the British used the terminology of cruiser, infantry, tanks, etc. for their own design of tanks, what about the Grant, Stuart, and Sherman tanks during their service during World War II, and did these like cruiser or infantry tanks? The Stuarts fell into the light tank category. The Grant,
You mean cruiser.
I think it was cruiser.
No, they weren't lights, because at this point in time you have just cruiser and infantry.
I think
Britain doesn't have a light.
Yeah, I think the Stuarts were cruisers, and I believe the Grant and I think the Grants were cruisers, just about. But the Sherman is what the British come to term a universal tank. So the Sherman is the first tank to earn that designation in British service. They think about calling it a cruiser, but they decide on calling it a universal.
Fleet, not fleet.
It's not at all. The Sherman was definitely not the first universal.
The first true universal that the Brits get is Centurion.
Yeah.
Well,
that's where that comes from.
I'm just looking at the order of battle for the Royal.
Why do I constantly keep hearing it? The Sherman called a universal tank, then, especially by the Tank Museum in particular.
Because they don't universal in terms
retroactively
of
you can apply it,
but it was never classed that at the time.
And the M4 was put into cruiser tank companies or units on most levels.
Did someone say the British Army?
Oh no! Here we go.
Anyways,
good. Somebody else can make the obligatory comment that I was thinking about having to make.
I could just post. Hold on. Let me just solve all the issues, and I'm just gonna post this. And then I'm gonna read the little tiny footnote. U.S. medium tanks were considered as cruiser tanks by the British Army. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, because
they don't really fit into the infantry category in terms of what they're meant for.
Yeah,
I'm going to correct. I forgot I heard someone like this as cruiser tank companies. That doesn't mean anything. So let's say Cromwell, for example, is also a cruiser tank. However, the notion that it is the standard British tank of World War II is kind of a weird thing when 21st Army Group has 2,000 Shermans and 451 Cromwells. So it's not like it. I mean, it's a solid 4-to-1 ratio, but I think the larger point being, at least in terms of doctrine, you can kind of argue all over the place. Cromwell was more importantly the 75mm armed tank for the armored reconnoitering squadrons. Sherman was not. Sherman was the standard tank of the 21st Army Group going into Normandy and beyond.
I'm also just to point out what because Steve Clark's mentioning British did have light tank, the Mark 6. I'm pretty sure the Mark 6 was still classed as a cruiser by British service.
Yeah, let me check. Because at least that would be basically only in the BEF in France.
Yeah.
Which you can see here.
I think you do also get them in Africa. You get the Vickers Mark 6C with the 15mm baser.
Oh God, that would be with. It's not just a armor. There is. God, what was it? East Africa Command? No.
Apparently, a bunch of them were used with the 4th Hussars and the 3rd King's Hussars.
But like large point
Yeah.
being, Sherman's a cruiser tank, and then what was it? Stuart gets this weird. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm not so sure it is just the. Sherman Firefly.
Yeah,
Sherman Firefly's a cruiser tank. Yep.
Yeah, A has the base, B has and the C has a base at 15 mil. Because the main, the Vickers the Mark 1 only has the Vickers 50.5 inch, basically the 303. Not the, there's the 50 cal version.
Well,
I'm trying to remember where the Stuarts were, at least for the British Army, because I don't remember them being in with, at least with the main squadrons, or like the main armored regiments, because what they were split between was between Sherman's, Grants, and Crusaders. Let me check. Neil Horser does not have an accurate source for that, so let me again. Hold on, I have a good source. We ask my wife.
wow. All right. While he's doing that,
Work.
quickly.
You too?
Yep. Well, it's a very, very quick one, because it's a really simple one-word answer. Why did the Argentine Navy ditch the 8.5-inch guns, 28 40mm guns, 1920mm air guns from the General Belgrano? Simple. Money. Or
No,
lack
they
thereof.
were useless. They were pretty much useless. It was extra top weight they didn't need. She's operating in and around heavy seas. And, like, are they going to provide any meaningful extra combat capability? No.
Yeah, exactly. But they don't have the money to replace them with anything else.
Well, I mean, it's also the case that people just generally did not replace those guns with anything at all in this period. I mean, you got look at the Royal Navy and most of its ships. Granted, did have sea cats; they had point defense missiles earlier than most other navies. But you look at the light gun armament; it's 2 single 20mm guns that are aimed by Joe Schmo sailor. Most navies really did not replace these light guns with much of anything at all.
Yeah, because they were
just
useless.
gone for free to operate.
The only place you tend to see guns like that retained is on missile boats.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Hang on, let me go to. I have it.
Things like the Israeli SARs. So.
Yeah, and you also have the Italians and the 76mm guns, but that's a little bit of a different caliber.
Well, I'm literally talking about 20 mil Oerlikons.
Yeah.
The SARs carried 2, one on each bridge wing.
Mm-hmm.
On the early ones.
God, yeah, I'm looking at it's a list of ships in this period. 1982, a lot of the French, only a handful of French ships even have the 20mm cannon. A lot of them had nothing smaller than the 100mm gun, or on the older ones, 57. But
yeah, you don't see the 20mm or 30mm calibers return until you start being worried about bog hammers and suicide attacks. And CWIS, but CWIS is in a completely different category of weapon to what we're talking about here. They just clutter up the deck. They're pointless. The Oerlikon 20s.
Yeah, completely.
Warfare has changed.
Oh yeah, completely agree.
What you are witnessing is advanced warfare. Sorry, I had to say it.
That's a reference, isn't it?
Yes, it is a reference. That is in fact a reference.
all out BTFO'd.
I'm just playing Crusader Kings right now.
Do you want to grab another one from Discord quickly then? Because the next one's very quick and simple. Or it should be.
Yes, it will be. You know what, Dragon? You read that one out because I want to basically avoid cyclic by him biting my head off. AMC
Wood. Do you mean the AMC Wood? What if Ulysses S. Grant was sent through time to the Second World War and put in charge of an army? Would he eventually command a full army group, or just stay in command of a singular army?
Are we talking before or after his Civil War service?
Presumably after.
In general.
Well, then he's gonna continue drinking himself to death out of guilt.
Oh dear.
The guy cared for the soldiers under his command, contrary to popular belief.
They should have just put him on ice and saved him for a future conflict.
Yes.
Anywho.
Sierra's back by the looks.
So,
I've been
Discord.
informed that it's just called the Stuart tank.
Oh, okay.
There is no cruiser designation for it.
Oh, wow. Okay,
It's
just the
neither a
Stuart.
cruiser or infantry. I mean, to be fair, it also Stuarts are by and large not very used by the British. I mean, there are like a couple of Honey Stuarts, and they're not really cruiser tank. They're just like, hey, here's a 37mm gun with some machine guns. Oh boy.
This is the first thing we were given. It's better than walking, I guess.
No. This was in 1944.
Oh.
Yeah.
They didn't use them in the Western Desert, though. I seem to recall.
Yeah. Oh no. Yes, they were a couple Stuarts at least with AIF Army. However, the majority of the tanks that they were given are, by and large, at least on paper, supposed to be Crusaders, Grants, and Shermans. It's how do I explain this? It's very weird how they did it because each armored regiment was supposed to have A squadron with Shermans, B squadron with Grants, C squadron with Crusaders. So, yeah, you have three different tanks within what is it in American parlance, a battalion.
This is positively Russian.
Yeah, see, I'm just recalling from my accounts of like the Italian armored forces and their experiences in North Africa, and it's like,
Yeah.
Obviously early war, lots of cruiser tanks and the odd infantry, but then there's like a significant number of Stuarts keep popping up, and then it's only like much later on that they run into the Grants and the Shermans, which are a much harder counter to almost anything the Italians have that isn't a tank destroyer, or really a semovente is a better term to use because it's like a self-propelled gun more than a tank destroyer. But tangent, sorry.
Yeah, but like by and large, the 10th Corps, which was the main primary armored corps of AIF Army within the Middle East entering El Alamein, was largely equipped with Crusaders, Shermans, and Grants. I don't see anything in terms. My main guess is that it's probably with the armored cars. Each brigade, so give or take, would have or like some kind of armored car component. Stuarts are largely fit within that. What that's based off of is kind of unknown, and at least within the context of this conversation, the designation of armored cars has no effect. I mean, look, I'm not gonna try to classify the AEC.
The
not worth
AEC
it.
is a wonderful vehicle, but
I mean, look, man, I remember from Steel Division 44 where it was a really good opener, and that's it.
well, it's basically right. It's basically given Fleet nightmares because a certain fox in the chat keeps using it to bully him in War Thunder. It is brokenly good in War Thunder, to be honest.
Fasten a 6-pounder and a smart driver, you just wreck ass.
It has a 6-pounder? That was a 75.
They have a
No,
There's
One.
3 variations in real life. I'm checking
It's
War
okay,
Thunders.
Steve Clark. I would like a source because I'm at least scrolling with 'cause
Gentlemen,
I understand the pre-war or like the sorry, I'm going to interrupt here for a second. I understand the
Just let
reconnaissance
let
regiments.
this one quickly finish, Fleet.
I have like an actual thing. Like, yes, I understand that the Stuarts were kept in with armored reconnaissance regiments. I'm still trying to look for a designation name, which was my thing.
Okay, so where was I? I am really not.
You're
getting...
now after.
I am
you're now after
really.
YouTube 1.
I am really not getting through the work today.
I
I need
quickly,
to.
Sierra, the one in War Thunder's the Mark II with the 6-pounder.
Yeah, I need to have a.
That's dumb.
I'm gonna need to have a special recorded ramblings where I go through questions. That's going to
I've
be
got
fun.
a document if you need it.
Yeah, would you kindly collate the document together, please? And I'll have to do that at some point.
What do you mean collate the document?
Oh, is it already? Oh, is it all one? Brilliant. Pass that over to me at some point. Right. Okay. YouTube question. Question of the YouTube. YouTube question. As I say. How well Wonka Gaming? How well did the Barbell class sub perform in U.S. service? Barbell. That's post-war, isn't it? That's the one of the post-war diesel boats, I believe. Let me just check. Poke the internet with a stick, see what happens.
I'm not at my computer at the moment.
Yes, it's
unpacking.
the last class of US diesel boats.
Oh, it's the teardrop shaped one, right?
Yes.
I mean, they were kept in service for quite a while.
Yeah, till 1989, 1990.
God, that's
Yeah, basically
crazy.
the end of the Cold War when the U.S.
It
didn't
stuck around.
when the U.S. stopped really caring about forward deploying submarines.
I mean, Blueback still exists,
Um,
by the way. She's a museum ship at the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry.
I mean, to be fair, you don't need because I'm my main guess is that you're probably going to be looking at like a Baltics deployment, which was by and large a fucking meme fest.
I mean,
They did have the range to operate out of Faslane as
You
well,
would-
and range up into the Greenland and Norwegian seas and cause problems there.
I mean,
don't know why
I
you
would,
just
I
didn't
would
use an SSM,
question.
though.
Yeah, I would
It's
question.
more subs available for
Yeah.
it.
I
I
would,
guess.
I would question whether or not you're a captain in good standing or a captain in bad standing to be assigned to a barbell class. Like, are you either considered a good captain because you're going to handle a diesel boat, not a nuke boat, or are you considered a bad captain because you've been given a diesel boat, not a nuke boat? I could see both being options.
Well, how much shorter they are than the regular SSMs in service to that point? Because if they're shorter, they might do a little bit better in more littoral environments than a lot of
Yeah,
the.
in and around Norway and also in the Med.
Let
Oh
me.
yeah, I mean, that's always one of the complaints. Oh, well, not complaints, but like because the Italians got lots of American fleet boats after the in the interwar, sorry, in the Cold War period, various guppies and upgraded versions, and their thing was always like they're so damn long that they just kind of awkward to maneuver in very enclosed littoral environments when you're doing sneaky things close to shore. It's kind of why they favored a lot of the much shorter SSKs that they developed, like the Toti class. But
Yeah, so looking at the first Seawolf SSN 575 and Skate, and the Skate class, you're looking at about 200 and... So you're looking at 300 feet for the Seawolf and 267 feet for the Skates. And for the barbells, you're looking at... I'm just actually trying to get to equivalent period. Yeah, so the Skates are the equivalent nuke boats. It seems, yeah, the Skates are the equivalent nuke boats, and they are 267 feet long. The barbells are 219 feet long. So I mean, I don't know if that reduction in length is significant enough to be that much of a multiplier in coastal operations. And also, there's a question about how quiet they are. Because they are 1950s diesel subs, so how quiet are they actually?
No, compared to a 1950s nuke boat, I mean, that's what you got to consider.
No, that's true, but I mean, we're talking about these boats lasting into the 80s, into the late 80s, one of them even lasting into 1990.
The U.S. kept a lot of those nuke boats around until the same period. A lot of those early nuke boats.
I mean, I suppose if you're taking one of, I mean, if they've survived to a potential, I'm just going to use the answer that everyone goes to, a bloody Red Storm Rising moment, then they're going to have ADCAP. Sorry, not ADCAP. Sorry, Mark 48. And if they've got Mark 48, then they're going to be probably as effective as any U.S. submarine.
Torpedoes are not what determines the effectiveness of a submarine. They can hamper it, but they're not what determines the effectiveness. What determines the effectiveness of a submarine is its sonar suite and how quiet it is.
From what they have, oh, I don't suppose it matters what sonar they have, or would you like to know? It's here on the Wikipedia, but I don't know if anyone knows the ins and outs of submarine sonar to make a judgment call on it. I certainly don't.
Daughters has clearly never read Stormers.
I just saw that.
So
Red
you're not
Storm
looking at
Rising.
the skates, you're looking at the skipjacks for the equivalent SSN. It's basically the same hull form. By the way, fleet.
Yeah.
And the skipjacks were kept in commission until the 1990s.
Yeah.
Well, until 1990 for about half the class. Because Scorpion sunk.
Yeah.
And I mean, the reality is most of these Soviet submarines, while these subs would have had a harder time, the U.S. would go on to refit a lot of these SSNs. How expansive that refit was depended on the sub, but
It lives again.
because some of these never had a hemispherical sonar, so you don't see the offset torpedo tubes like the skipjack class. They have the traditional in the bow torpedo tubes rather than offset on the flanks to allow for a proper spherical, or even just straight up proper full bow array. Instead, they had two smaller cylindrical arrays above and below the torpedo tubes. But it depends. I can't really say that what boat you get, particularly in the U.S. submarine fleet of the Cold War. Let me pull up, because I can tell you exactly how many submarines once I find it here. The U.S. had in we'll go with 1988, or I'll do 1987. Once I find the link here in my hilarious amount of bookmarks.
At least you bookmark them and don't just leave the tab open on like Moo.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, what the fuck? You don't just a bit of different tabs to reference.
I don't keep that many tabs open. No.
Never
And when I'm
understood
actively
Boston
doing
can
research,
have
I keep
so
a
many.
running document with all the links sorted and listed by topic.
Also, God, whoever named the Army Allied Forces Central Europe AA zones should be shot.
Oh dear. Right, okay, moving
Next.
yes, I probably shouldn't I? I've only got
Alright,
about
I
half
found
an
it.
hour left.
Alright, blitz time.
Alright, real quick, I have found it. So, at the end of fiscal year 86, the United States Navy fielded 101 submarines, not including the ballistic missile submarines, of which there were 39.
Good lord, that's insane.
Next question, Fleet.
Yes. So, next question, Fleet. He says, if I remember where the hell I was, going out to find things and going back up to look for things. I'm not good at this ramblings thing. I've been doing it for bloody
Should be
3.
from Gunnery Officer.
Um,
In particular, I believe question 4.
no. Brackman actually is
Oh, is that
next.
Oh, is it not?
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh no. Sorry, no, it's not. That was relation to.
No.
Yeah. Oh no. Never mind. Yeah. So, your typical officer. Thoughts on the Saipan class CVL? Why did the US even bother putting CVLs in service during post-war, since they're building the rest of the Essex class and the Midways? Also, almost every Independence class CVLs and all the CVEs were removed from active duty when the Saipans were commissioned. Because the Saipans are basically the latest and greatest US-like carriers, so there's no point keeping around the escort carriers and the Independences when you've got the Saipans. And
I would also point out you only get 2 Saipans.
yes. So, and also they were kind of nearly finished, and I know the US cancelled a lot of ships, but there's a difference between cancelling a battleship that hasn't even been launched yet, aka the last 2 Iowas, Montanas, etc., and cancelling a light carrier that's in the final stages
Most
of
of its way
fitting
through
out.
construction.
Yeah. Also, it gives the
They
US.
also had, there were,
It also gives the
there were
US.
also a couple other benefits.
Yeah, it also gives the US 2 holes it can poke at, and poke
Well,
they
yeah, 'cause
did.
They also had better internal spacing, a slightly strengthened deck, and a few others.
Yeah. They also.
And then in the late 50s, they just then went, well, these don't fit modern planes. What if we turn them into a communication ship and command sort of facilities?
Yeah, they poked them rather aggressively.
YouTube?
Yes. Wonka Gaming, what would happen if the CVA-01 project gets built and put into service? You're looking at either 2 to 4 carriers, depending on how much funding the project gets. You're talking about
There's a lot of knock-ons.
Yes, there are. But to try and make a long story slightly less long, although I'll probably fail in this, you're talking about the RN retaining Cato bar capability in some form through into the 21st century.
You'll also likely see the Type 82s actually have a proper run.
I don't know if you do or not. That may be a bit too much.
It's literally what they were intended to do, so...
Okay, what did I miss? I had a call from my old landlord.
The question is basically, what if the CVO-1s were actually built? What does this basically cause?
The British CVA-01?
Yes, the British ones.
Yeah, I basically said...
they're going to retire most of their other carriers.
Well, yeah,
I've just mentioned that they would likely finish at least a couple more of the Type 82s, considering that was what their job was, as far as I'm aware, is to escort them.
I mean, there's extra fun... I mean, there may be a reason for it, but that doesn't mean that there's any funding for it, Dragon.
But it's also much harder to try and cancel it now, because the thing that we literally are making these for, and we've already got one of, are now actually ready.
Make no mistake. Yeah, but Dragon, you're talking about the British government during the Cold War.
If they've got the money to launch these, they're probably going to. Sorry about the leaf blower. They're wonkers coming through the complex.
At this point in time, you don't launch these incredibly impressive ships, relatively speaking, and then skimp on everything else.
I mean,
I would point out
it looks at the modern Royal Navy.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't even.
Yeah,
that's even worse in a lot of regards. But also, you might potentially see Sea Vixen continue, because Sea Vixen had a proposed upgrade for plans to be kept with CVA-01, and as soon as CVA-01 was cancelled, Sea Vixen was cancelled.
Yeah.
I kind of hope Sea Vixen would get cancelled.
Yeah, you would do. Just like.
But there were plans to upgrade it, reinforce the. They basically had the same idea they had with the what's called.
Yeah, but Dragon.
Buccaneer.
Yes, but Dragon, keeping Sea Vixen is objectively worse than getting Phantom.
But it's what the plan was.
And yeah, they might be able to make it work.
They wanted to strengthen the frame, stick better equipment
Make
on
it work by a
afterburners.
given definition of a government, not by a given naval definition. But yeah, so
Phantoms would be the logical thing to go, but you probably do have Sea Vixen and Scimitar have a bit of a longer lifespan.
Yeah,
which conversely, no, it depends on.
Will drag well, potentially, yeah.
Conversely means maybe the stupid engines don't happen on the British Phantoms. You know, a lot of people like to talk about how those engines were to help them operate from these other carriers and yada yada yada. The reality is, yes, they had higher thrust, but nobody thought about the weight increase.
So the net gain was 0.
Net gain was 0. What really helped them was the extendable front landing gear, so they could get a higher angle of attack on launch. Which they wouldn't need any of this on CVA-01.
No.
I mean, the reality of the engines was that at the time there was a lot of political lobbying to use that British engine in the British Phantoms. The Royal Air Force didn't care because, okay, whatever, it's higher thrust. It's not a meaningful difference for them. But it would be interesting, you know, if that happens a little bit later, what goes on there. If say this push doesn't happen until the mid 70s, then there's a whole nother thing of, do you stick with a Phantom for these carriers, or do you go with a newer aircraft that's cheaper to run, that has infinitely better avionics, infinitely better air-to-air capacity because of those avionics, not because of the kinematics of the platform, also is able to do the strike roll.
Where are you going with this?
F-18
I'm always asking,
comes
would
out
this
in the
potentially...
mid-70s.
I'm always asking, would this potentially save the British aerospace industry?
Not
Probably
really.
not.
Absolutely not.
It might let it live a little bit longer, but it won't save it.
It'll keep it on the ventilator for a little bit, but that power is still going to run out.
And I will point out that there will be some savings because it's highly likely that if the British and the French are looking for a new carrier strike aircraft, like they probably will procure F-18 to do the fleet defense multi-role, but for strike, as in dedicated naval
What
strike.
year are we talking here?
You may. I mean, we're probably actually. I'm probably
The
actually.
70s or 80s?
I'm probably actually talking 70s because I'm talking prior to our acquisition of F-18.
Then you're
the reason
probably still...
That's
I think you're thinking Buccaneers.
Can I?
Gone.
Thank you. Like, yes, you'll have Buccaneers existing, but I reckon that if you have Britain and France both still in the Catobar game, and Britain and France working on a certain land-based strike fighter / light bomber,
Jaguar is utterly not suitable for this role. Jaguar is in the same strike category as an F-18 is. It's not in the category of a Buccaneer.
And also keep in mind...
In fact, I think it might actually be less than an F-18. Practically
The Buccaneers
speaking.
are also only introduced like 8 years earlier than this. Bit more. And the Fleet Air Arm do quite like the Buccaneer.
Yeah, the Buccaneer has a lot of potential to be upgraded in this environment that it just never really got.
That said, like we've discussed numerous times, Fleet, of some of the mad ideas they had for Buccaneer, like supersonic Buccaneer.
That's a horrifying thought. Thank you.
And how much would they just go, instead of going for Jaguar, they just go roll carrier capability into the Tornado project?
No,
They
that's a
looked at it
really
for
bad
Tornado.
idea. That's a
No,
really...
it's not as bad of an idea as you think it is, Fleet. Particularly when you have a CVA-01 sized aircraft carrier
but
and
swing
not a
wing,
Malta sized.
But swing wing maintenance problems.
Right,
Fleet.
Right, Fleet.
Swing wing maintenance problems do not all equate to the F-14. What made the F-14 so expensive was its particular engines on the F-14As.
And if you want to talk about that, Fleet, keep in mind the RAF and Fleet Air Arm both looked at the idea of let's put swing wings on the English Electric Lightning and stick them on carriers.
What in the name of Tom?
The Sea Lightning.
That's not as crazy as you think it is.
Am I the only
The
one who
Soviets
doesn't...
did this with numerous Sukhois.
Am I the only one who seemingly has completely missed this area of naval and aviation knowledge?
Apparently,
it's
yes.
not naval. You're going with the pop history swing wing story.
Have I been conned by pop history again, Cyclic?
Yeah, by the same.
When haven't you?
Oh God, Sea Dodders, I hate that.
Do I even want to walk over to my computer right now?
Ah, well,
It's a Sea Lightning, but it's got the overwing pods, and they're not for.
That's the.
It's carrying two. It's carrying
No
two
comment.
red. It's carrying two red top missiles.
Okay,
Two
that
others on the
one's...
wings I can't recognize, and then are they meant to be fuel pods on the top?
The Sea Lightning, like Swing Wing Lightning, okay, fine, it will make it easier to land. But putting Lightning on a carrier is like, yes, okay, it will work.
I thought you said it wasn't
But
an
what are you-
insane idea.
No, it'll work. It's not an insane idea. It's just a question of there's so many aircraft that can do this job better.
There's a difference between
The Lightning was not a very particularly good aircraft. It was a better Western MiG-21 purely as an interceptor. In like every other role, it was not good.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Fleet, just because something's not an insane idea does not make it a good idea. It can still be a bad idea, just not be insane.
You people are hitting me with a logic stick really hard this evening.
We have to
need
on
to get the
we have to on
2x4.
occasion. Nah, get the 2x8.
Come on, the 2x4's bad enough.
I prefer the 4x4.
Oh, for fuck's
That'll get the
sake,
job
no!
done.
Denser.
I don't want to. I don't.
And you can get them in really dense wood, too.
Mm.
Should we move on to another question? Or...
Yep. Keep
Yeah.
going, Fleet.
All right. Where are we? Next question. Sometimes I wonder if I'm not. Well, sometimes I wonder if I'm not a guest on my own show. Sometimes.
Well, you said you wanted to try and blitz through questions.
True. No, but it's more of an inside joke.
Okay, let's blitz through questions. Let's go, people.
No, come on, tangent, let's go.
Oh, for God's sake, boys!
The next question. I know what the next question should be, and
I
that's
know.
proper tangent worthy.
Yeah, and I know that everyone here is a Star Wars nerd, so we're doomed.
Apart from one, at
Oh,
least.
no.
no.
What is this
I
question?
can't stand the fucking series.
You
So,
are
yeah.
No.
AMC Woods asks, you are in command of the Republic's Open Circle fleet during the Clone Wars and are tasked with taking out a Subjugator-class heavy cruiser escorted by 10 Providence-class destroyers, 15 Requisite-class destroyers, 30 Munificent-class frigates which has been attacking Republic fleets in the mid-rim. What will
For
you
the Open
use to
Circle
take
fleet,
out
that
this
isn't a
task
problem
force?
at all.
What will you use to take out this task force, and what is your strategy?
Anakin
Like-
Skywalker at sufficient velocity.
Pretty much. Pretty much. You send Anakin and Ahsoka at the problem with a squadron of bombers. And you throw some
Okay,
Arc 170s in for escort.
They
Like,
don't have Arc 170s yet, depending on when this is. If
I
it's
mean,
early war, they don't have the Arc 170s.
We've got
yet.
a mandate knocking
okay, then
around, haven't
you
we?
drop out of hyperspace, you launch, you drop back in.
You don't.
you jump
We don't
back
have
out.
the Mandator 2 yet, fleet.
Do we have a
Well,
Praetor?
Praetor-
The,
what-
the other thing
We have the
is
Mandator 1, but they're not leaving the core.
there are other Republic battle cruisers that exist that are would be thoroughly capable of taking on if you bring a couple of them in. But I can't remember if the Open Circle fleet actually had that, and I believe they did not. But the answer is you drop your Venators out of hyperspace, get the fleet to deploy in one direction, jump out, jump back in suddenly on another direction, launch your fighters, jump back out, have them focus hard on the ion cannons, like the 2 ion cannons,
Yeah.
or the subjugator, and then you come in. And you come in hard because the
Honestly-
subjugators don't have a crazy amount of very heavy anti-ship weaponry. Like they have a ton of like light turbo lasers and stuff like that from memory. And some heavies, but if you're bringing, I just bring the fucking
Right.
full
500 dual turbo lasers, 20 twin heavies, 20 twin mediums, 200 twin lights.
That's
400
if you're
point
if you're
defense
coming in
bands.
as the Open Circle fleet, you've got this in the bag.
What about its escorts,
Honestly,
though?
the bigger problem is the escorts.
You
Because
still
that
have
has
this in
a
the
lot of
bag
escorts,
as the
yeah.
Open Circle fleet. The Open Circle fleet is massive.
If we can bring the entirety of the Open Circle fleet sort of thing.
The,
Just
this
bring the
is-
hammer
this
down
is-
on them.
This is the kind of asset that warrants that. You bring the hammer down.
Yes,
like-
you might lose ships due to the ion cannon. But,
Well, this is why you
Yeah.
bring the hammer down and you drop your fighters out and your bombers out. You let them start working that over. And then you drop back in, deploy more fighters for your screen. The CIS's fighters are all going to be occupied on your strike. They swoop in, they can go after them that way. And then you just start going to town with the Venators.
The only thing I'd be worried about is this is a lot of droid fighters. This is
It is, but the Open Circle fleet wildly outnumbers this.
Yeah.
Even in the time period where
are we basically just dropping?
malevolence was a thing.
Are we basically just dropping all the Venators in the world on them?
You're
Or-
dropping like 50 to 100 Venators.
Plus all their escorting Arquitans.
And other ships from the
Oh,
very
the
force.
the Arquitens wings are gonna have a field day, just going off,
Honestly,
tearing up
they're-
the flanks.
Honestly, if we actually
No,
do
they're
things properly,
going to
we
be
bring
in and
acclimators.
screening the Venators.
Yeah. If we do this properly, you have them as screens. Acclimators is your second line cruiser because Acclimators are actually a very powerful cruiser unit. They're just never shown that in the Clone Wars cartoon. Then you've also got the smaller ships beyond that. You bring
Yeah.
one hell of a force.
And the Open Circle fleet canonically also had a good chunk of dreadnought heavy cruisers in them. because they had subsumed a bunch of planetary defense forces, and dreadnoughts were everywhere. Or a bunch of sector defense forces, I should say, not planetary. Into the Republic Navy. So you have a ton of those. You're bringing to bear Arquitans. You're bringing to bear, what is it, CR-70s. You've got all sorts of.
You've got
I mean,
Carracks, I'm pretty sure. Like, there's
Yeah.
a lot of smaller ships.
Like you just bring the hammer down. You can leave some of your light forces out to patrol, and maybe a reserve of Venators to support them if Grievous comes in from another direction or something.
I mean, it's possible that Grievous could be flying his flag aboard whatever subjugator this is.
It could be, but then you have other
Not
admirals.
after the Malevolence.
Yeah, he's not getting entrusted with that.
I mean, God forbid.
I'd be more worried about Trench.
Yeah, I was going to say, God forbid he has it.
In which case, if Trench is running it, you bring the hammer down anyways and you crush him. Like, that's the reality of naval warfare, right?
Oh, no, completely.
When you have a target like this, when they've concentrated up like this, this is one of the reasons the U.S. is so interested in using the first island chain against China, is you force them to concentrate, to have to break through, or to take a component of it to allow easy passage of supply ships, and you just bring the hammer down on the amphibious force or the covering force.
Yeah. Something I would like to say is, if we are bringing the hammer down, and we are doing this, might it not be possible to... I mean, I know we've got the Venators, but you say, in military terms, you never want to have just enough or enough to guarantee victory. You want to just basically go in with the knowledge you're going to smash the ever-living crap out of whatever you're fighting.
Yes.
I know the
You're
open
about
circle...
to propose bringing in a dreadnought. Or a Star Dreadnought.
As large a ship as we can get, at least as fleet
No.
flag.
You're not right. You're not
No.
going to be able to get the Pride of the Core
Well,
or the others. They are.
And the other thing
all
is, by the
mandators
time they
are
get to you, the
kept in place by
Separatists are going to be
politics.
gone.
Okay, yeah,
Um,
that was going to be the
There's
next
another
part of
problem.
my question. Yeah.
You're gonna bringing that ship in. It's going to draw a lot of flat fire. It's going to draw a lot of Malevolence's attention, and potentially, if those ion cannons are up, it's going to draw that. It's also going to have a harder time getting in and out, jumping in and out of hyperspace compared to your rest of your fleet. So it's going to delay those maneuvers. It's
Yeah.
a red herring and dead weight. Because here's the thing, it's not going to take many shots from that ion cannon to drop its shields. And once its shields are down, now you have to protect it. Because you can't lose it.
The two largest ships you might reasonably see, and even then, is if you're incredibly
Crocodiles.
lucky and get. Well, I'm thinking if you're incredibly lucky, you'll have your hands on a single Rothana battlecruiser, but they are hyper rare. Or Secutors.
There's also the Procursors.
There's also there's technically one, but we haven't actually seen what it looks like, called the Maelstrom class.
Yes.
But
no,
I
it's a
think-
very powerful ship. We've just never physically seen it.
Yeah, but one
in
thing
anything.
that you've made quite clear to me about this whole scenario is that the problem with us being in the open circle fleet is that we're just far enough away from the core where a lot of these big assets are, that by the time if we wait,
no.
Talking about are not tied to the core. They are
Open
Republic-
circle's just really huge.
Yeah. The open circle fleet was the outer rim offensive fleet.
Oh, I see. So basically, if we find a task force of the size where we want to deal with it like this, we want to bring the hammer down, we don't have time to wait for reinforcements. We've got to basically go.
No.
We've got to go.
Yeah, you got to go. And to be honest, against this size of task force, it's a obtuse misallocation of resources to bring more than 2/3 of the open circle fleet to bear. But 2/3 of the open circle, even a third of the open circle fleet to bear here, is bringing the hammer down, a third to half.
Oh, nice. Fair enough. Okay, then
so-
that makes sense.
And leaves you with more than enough to screen and keep the pressure up elsewhere. Like, this is not that big of a task force for the Clone Wars, at least by the later stages. But you just bring the hammer down as the response with the Open Circle fleet.
Yeah.
You are a considerable chunk of the Republic's naval might.
Yeah.
It's the best bet.
Yeah. So yeah, there we go. There you are, folks. So final question, which is going to be a YouTube question. Wonka Gaming asks, and this is actually a fairly good one to end off on, why did the US retire all of their nuclear-powered cruisers? Me and Dr. Clark talked similarly about this on Brew Ships yesterday, but I'm interested to hear what Cyclic and Phoenix have to say.
So, I'll go and then I'll let Phoenix go. Okay. The end result here is none of them were Aegis. They would have been very, very, very expensive and prohibitive to refit into Aegis. None of them were Mark 41 VLS equipped. It's the 1990s. You are in the Mark 41 age. Anything else is, quite frankly, not a viable combatant as a large surface combatant from the U.S. Navy's perspective. The other aspect of this is they are hilariously expensive to operate because of the crew costs. And not just number of crew, but type of crew you need. You need to keep a group of sailors on those ships that are in the hardest to retain billet in the United States Navy. Bar none. Oh, and they're a billet that they know if they go civilian, they can write their own paycheck at a nuclear power plant. And it's the 90s. Budgets are shrinking. They don't offer meaningful combat capability compared to a VLS Tycho. The Tychos are cheaper to operate. The Tychos are younger. They're less hard run. They have more capable radars. They carry more missiles. They can carry a wider array of missiles and other equipment. And they contribute much more to the offensive strike of the fleet. Phoenix?
Yeah.
I've pretty much covered the entire thing. I mean, quite frankly, it's also to keep in mind that for a lot of these ships, like most of pretty much all the cruisers the U.S. Navy had at the end of the Cold War were pretty much all old guided missile frigates built between cruisers and destroyers. Pretty much all arm launchers and very specific to their role. A lot of them were aging out and needed to be replaced anyways. And quite frankly, this gets at you into the whole point of like, why did the cruiser die? Because they had no reason to exist compared to destroyers, right? These just limited air defense capabilities, very limited strike capabilities, especially compared to the flexibility that you got with a Ticonderoga or an Arleigh Burke, right? It was just
the Arleigh Burkes outgunned most of them.
Yeah, and in fact, if you look at when the Arleigh Burkes were being procured, the list of ships that there's about 58 ships that they were expected to replace. A good chunk of those were older Cold War destroyers, but a very good chunk of those, a large chunk of those were the now re-rated cruisers that were formerly guided missile frigates. A lot of these being nuclear-powered ships, a lot of the early ones. So a lot of the extended range SAM ships were going to be going the way of the Dodo anyway. All the SM-2ER ships that were NTU upgraded or were supposed to be NTU upgraded if the Cold War had gone on longer, because these ships the launchers were very limited, could only employ a specific missile with a very low rate of fire, and they were going to get that missile type in a superior version in VLS down the line anyways. And then if you look at really the ships that would have actually stuck around longer because of that weren't being replaced by the Arleigh Burkes, you're looking at really the last of these guided missile frigate/cruisers, which is like the Virginia and California class, where they're Mark 26 ships that bring the same kind of missiles that the first 5 Ticonderoga class cruisers/destroyers bring, and those the U.S. Navy also got rid of relatively early in the early 2000s. There was just no reason to keep them around.
They were truly surplus to requirements, if not outright obsolete in many cases.
Yeah, and frankly, if you're the U.S. Navy, you're going to be in for a very lean situation in the future because there is no great naval arrival, and there's not going to be one for a while. So you have to preserve as much of your high-end strength as possible, and in this case, that meant, making sure you get all the Arleigh Burks you want, making sure you get your next class of carriers. Well, submarines kind of got screwed anyways, but right. But this is not a period where you want to be wasting a lot of money on a frankly obsolescent class of nuclear-powered surface combatant that doesn't really have a role going forward.
And you certainly don't have the money to build any new ones.
Oh God, no. I mean, frankly,
They also don't make
the
fiscal
argument doesn't
sense
exist.
when you sit there and you do the analysis. Particularly in the 90s and early 2000s, they just do not make the monetary sense. That cutoff point is about 30,000 tons heavier.
Yep.
Nah, they're amazing.
Yeah, I mean, even if the Cold War had gone on longer, the justification did not exist, and we saw that like a decade earlier, right? Think of all the failed attempts to procure a cruiser beforehand. Any capability you could reasonably get out of them, you were going to get out of a Ticonderoga or an Arleigh Burke, so...
What are we even talking about?
The U.S. nuclear cruisers.
You've literally arrived right at the end.
Mm-hmm. I've posted the list of questions that went unanswered this time.
Thank you. For everyone who's shown up on Discord and YouTube, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've all enjoyed. I am planning to do a recorded or another live ramblings at some point, or however many it takes to basically catch up on unanswered questions and try and plow through them as aggressively as I can. I may even devote 1 or 2 Friday nights to it, to seeing how things go.
Just doing the ones I've counted.
Yes, I'm aware, it's a lot. But that will happen. Anybody who is joining the Hoy game after Ramblings, please do join us. It'd be nice to have people in. Anybody who isn't, I hope you've enjoyed Ramblings, and I hope you'd catch you next week. Take care, everybody.
At least 98 questions.
Oh boy.
If not, there's more. I can say that for certain.
And the list will keep getting longer with questions I don't answer over Ramblings. Whoop-de-doo.
Yeah.
Right, anyway, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Phoenix, Cyclic, Dragon, Foxo, Guy, and Dr. Clark in absentia for being this week's panel. Thank you to all the questions from all the people on YouTube and Discord. Yes, and C. Doddis says, don't forget to give Fleet your money. But honestly, if you can, fantastic. If you can't, it's fine either way. Thanks very much, everybody.
Remember, Fleet, demand money off them.
Yes, Foxo, I'm aware that Dr. Clark has a bayonet in your back.
Give this poor guy your money. He needs it.
Thank you, Cyclic.
Look, if Fleet no get money, Fleet no live anymore because Fleet can't afford food. And if Fleet can't afford food, that means no ramblings. So give him your money.
Yeah, there you are.
We'll give him the typical student diet. He's allowed nothing but basically pot noodles.
What the freshman 15 lost?
Right. Right, folks. I need
that
to...
wasn't how it worked for me. It was the other direction.
Yeah. Right. I gotta go, because otherwise I'll run out of time to do the thing. Take care, folks, and I'll catch